Chapter 2769. Based on the clues provided by Chu Xiaobao, Gu Jinglian formed a portrait in his mind, but he could not remember for a long time that he had been in contact with such a woman. Short hair? Just this point alone was enough to cut off all the clues. Among the women he had been with, none of them had short hair. He liked long hair, dark and waist length. Therefore, among the women he had been with, none of them had short hair. She was very tall and very thin. As a police officer, it meant that she had good skills. However, for Chu Xiaobao, the so-called very tall might not be very tall. Relatively speaking, for a child's field of vision, the concept of very tall was probably between 1.5 to 1.6 meters. The most important point was, previously through the DNA genetic test at the police station, he could not find her in the DNA information database. This meant that this woman was an illegal resident. There were only a few reasons why she was an illegal resident. Either she had been missing for too long and her household registration had been cancelled, or she had a special identity such as a member of the black organization, a black agent, a spy, an assassin, or an undercover agent. Wait, undercover? Suddenly, a thought flashed through Gu Jinglian's mind. He frowned. In the river of sand in his memory, a woman's cold face flashed past, black shoulder-length hair, exquisite facial features, cold eyebrows, and a kind of boldness that ordinary women did not have. She did not have a name, only a code name, Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird, the highest anti-crime inspector of the Interpol. Could it be her? Gu Jinglian was not very clear about this woman's appearance, but vaguely, those exquisite eyebrows seemed to match Xiaobao's young and tender eyebrows. Gu Jinglian was in a daze for a long time. 6 years ago, this woman was planted by his side as an undercover agent. At that time when he first came to power, he was ambitious. In order to expand his territory, he was unscrupulous and ruthless. He offended many forces. The Gu family's power continued to expand. In the end, because of the cross-border arms sales, they even built 2 military factories in Vietnam and North America, which alarmed the Interpol. However, at that time the Gu family had many connections in the capital. Coupled with the protection of the country's government, the Interpol could not do anything to them. At that time, Vermilion Bird was an anti-corruption inspector. She was sent on a mission to infiltrate the Gu family as a spy. She used her methods to get close to him and was ordered to carry out an assassination plan. However, because her identity was exposed and the assassination failed, the Gu family sent people to hunt her down. In the end, she managed to escape and her whereabouts became a mystery. Thinking of this, Gu Jinglian furrowed his brows. His gaze was deep and serene as he collected his thoughts. His gaze was complex. He didn't know that the woman was pregnant with his child. This woman was very powerful. Back then, when she was placed by his side, she did not reveal any flaws. Even he did not notice anything strange about her. However, 5 years ago his whereabouts were unknown, and his whereabouts were a mystery. In this way, the characteristics of all aspects were basically consistent. He didn't expect it to be her. He thought that she was dead. Interpol also secretly searched for her for a few months, but in the end they could only conclude that she was dead. After losing their beloved general, the Interpol secretly erased all her information for 100 years. But did she lose her memory? So, she didn't remember anything? Including her memories of him. Chapter 2770. In the police station, Chu Ho sat quietly on the bench, patiently waiting for news. Unknowingly, it was already late. Mu Yanqing settled Meng Qingxue in a hotel. Her body was still weak, and she was exhausted after a day's drive. Although she was a little worried about Xiaobao's whereabouts, Chu Ho comforted her that even if she stayed at the police station, she might not be able to make any progress. She might as well go back to the hotel to rest first. Meng Qingxue listened to her. Chu Ho waited at the police station for an entire night. The police officer clearly told her that there would not be any progress if she just waited at the police station. The DNA test would take some time. It was already so late and the hospital had already knocked off, so there would not be any movement. The earliest they could get the DNA test report would be tomorrow morning, when the hospital went back to work. The police station would then send someone to rush them. However, Chu Ho stubbornly stayed at the police station and refused to leave. She firmly believed that she had to know Xiaobao's whereabouts as soon as possible. Otherwise, no matter how tired she was, she would not be able to sleep in peace. It was a long night. Finally, dawn came. Chu Ho waited for several hours in torment. Finally, at 10:30 a.m., the hospital gave her a reply. The police officer brought her to the hospital and personally collected the report. When she held the report in her hand, Chu Ho looked at the words on the report. Confirmed paternity. She finally could not control her surging emotions and her eyes turned red with excitement. Is Xiao Bao? He's still fine. He's still alive and well. Chu Ho was so excited that her shoulders trembled uncontrollably. She thought that he must have met with some mishap, but she had been controlling herself and did not dare to think of the worst. She was afraid that her words would really come true. However, when she learned that Xiao Bao was still alive and well, she was so surprised that she could not believe it. Officer, have you seen this report? Chu Ho handed the report to the police officer with a smile on her face. Since it's confirmed that I'm related to that child, please bring me to him immediately. Strange. The police officer held the report and muttered with a strange expression. When Chu Ho heard this, she raised her eyebrows and asked in confusion, "What's strange about it? Is this child really your biological son?" The police officer raised his hand and rubbed his chin as he narrowed his eyes. But I contacted the Shangguan Public Security Bureau yesterday, and they replied that the child was brought back by his biological father. Since you're the child's mother, then, what's the relationship between you and the child's father? Generally speaking, no matter how abnormal the relationship between a child's mother and father was, a child's mother. In other words, even if they were divorced, the children's parents would still be able to communicate with each other. However, no matter how he looked at it, he felt that this woman's background was somewhat unusual. He bit her lip and said with some difficulty, "Actually, I don't know who the child's biological father is." What? You don't know? The police officer was shocked. How is that possible? No matter how careless a woman was, she would still know who the father of her child was, right? Unless it was a one-night stand. After making love with a strange man, she accidentally got pregnant and gave birth to the child. It's true. Chapter 2771. After a pause, He added, "Later I found out that I was pregnant, but I lost all my memories of who the child was, who the father was, and what my relationship with that man was. I can't remember even the slightest bit." You didn't try hard to remember? It's no use. Chu Ho shook her head, looking exhausted. I racked my brains but I still couldn't remember. The doctor said that I lost my memory because my head was severely injured. There was a blood clot in my brain, and it had congealed into a blood clot that pressed on my nerves. In addition, subconsciously, I didn't want to recall that past. However, if the blood clot eventually disappeared, there was a possibility that I could regain my memory. The police officer said suspiciously, "But the strange thing was that I couldn't find any information about you in the database. Even the household registration center couldn't get your file. What kind of special identity did you have in the past? So special that all the networks couldn't find out who you were?" Chu Ho said, "I really don't remember. What my identity was, who I was, and what happened in the past, I don't care about it." As she said that, she walked in front of him and held his shoulders tightly. "I just want to see my son right now. Didn't you say that as long as the DNA report confirms our parent-child relationship, you'll be able to bring me to him?" The police officer was stunned for a moment, then nodded silently. "Calm down, don't be agitated. Don't worry, the child is very safe. Come back to the police station with me later. I'll help you contact him and bring you to see him." "Okay." Chu Ho smiled and her expression finally relaxed. However, perhaps it was because she hadn't slept well for a few days, but Chu Ho's complexion was really bad. Her eyelids were dark and her face was ashen. There was no color in her face. He couldn't help but worry. "Do you want to have a good rest? You don't look well." "No need." Chu Ho waved her hand. "I'm fine." The police officer was kind. "Madam Chu, if you ask me, your body is your own. You haven't slept for a few days, right? If this goes on, your body will be exhausted. Even if it's for the child, you have to take good care of your body." He sucked in a deep breath of cold air and turned around abruptly. Staring at him with bloodshot eyes, she asked, "Have you ever had a child? Do you know the pain of being separated from your own flesh and blood?" She continued to push him. The police officer stared at her blankly. Chu Ho's shoulders heaved uncontrollably. Over the past few days, he had been scared witless, restless, and worried about Xiao Bao's whereabouts. Coupled with the fact that he hadn't slept for a few days and his physical exhaustion, he vented all of his frustrations. "For the past 5 years, Xiao Bao has never left my side. He must be very scared and helpless right now. He must want to see me immediately. I miss him very much too. I'm very worried about him. No matter how much you emphasize to me that he's safe and not in danger, I also hope to appear in front of him in the next second to comfort him, protect him, and not let him be frightened. You're a police officer. What you have to do is to help me find the child immediately, not..." Chu Ho's blood rushed to her heart. Halfway through her sentence, there was a destructive darkness in front of her, and her body swayed lightly. Chapter 2772. When Meng Qingxue heard the news, she rushed to the hospital with Mu Yanqing. When they reached the door of the ward, they pushed it open and rushed in. They saw Chu Ho lying sickly on the bed. Her face was pale and weak and there was no sign of life. It was as if her body was already an empty shell. Meng Qingxue rushed to the bed anxiously, only to see Chu Ho lying on the bed. Even though she was unconscious, her brows were tightly knitted, as if she was immersed in great pain. The doctor was holding a clipboard by the bed and writing something silently. Meng Qingxue walked over and lowered her voice. She asked in a panic, "Doctor, what's wrong with her? Why does she look so weak? What's going on?" When the doctor heard this, he could not help but turn to look at them. After sizing them up for a while, he asked, "Are you the patient's family members?" "Yes." Meng Qingxue replied without thinking. The doctor nodded. 3 hours ago, the patient was sent to the hospital. After a checkup, we found that her body is very weak. Preliminary diagnosis is that she has not had good rest for a long time and is physically exhausted. Furthermore, she has very serious anemia. Moreover, after a brain CT scan, we found that there is a large blood clot in the patient's head that is pressing on the cranial nerves. "Is it very serious?" Meng Qingxue asked worriedly. "As the patient's family member, don't you know about her physical condition? Her condition is very serious. She needs immediate surgery to drain the blood clot." The doctor was a little surprised. Meng Qingxue shook her head. "I only know that she suffered a serious head injury due to an accident and lost all her memories." "The patient has amnesia?" "Yes." The doctor pondered for a moment before saying, "It's probably because the blood clot is pressing on the nerves. I suggest immediate surgery." Meng Qingxue sucked in a breath of cold air, obviously a little shocked. "Surgery?" Her hands trembled uncontrollably. "Don't tell me we need a craniotomy?" In her impression, any surgery that required moving the brain was a craniotomy. However, such a surgery was too risky. When the time comes, a few surgical plans will be given. It also depended on the specific location of the blood clot. If it was in the brain or the internal capsule, it would definitely require a craniotomy, which was also very risky. However, if the location of the blood clot is relatively shallow, we can also perform a minimally invasive surgery to remove the hematoma through ventriculoscopy. Minimally invasive? Is it an incision on the surface of the head? The doctor nodded. "Yeah, that's pretty much it. What if we don't do the surgery?" "There are countless possible risks, but for the time being we can't determine the specifics." Some patients insisted on not undergoing surgery because the location of the blood clot was more dangerous. It pressed on the nerves and skull. There were also some patients who died of sudden cerebral hemorrhage. There were also cases where the blood clot slowly disappeared after more than 10 years. Everyone's physique was different, and the situations they encountered were also different. However, to be safe, surgery was still recommended. If it presses on other nerves in the future, it will be difficult to determine the unknown risk. Meng Qingxue clenched her fists, frowned slightly, and asked, "How long will it take to prepare for the operation?" "If you are well prepared, the operation can be carried out the day after tomorrow. However, the family member's signature is required." Chapter 2773. At night, there was a sudden thunderstorm. A white light suddenly flashed outside the window, followed by a thunderclap. Chu Xiaobao was awakened from his sleep by the sound of thunder. He was so frightened that he cried out loud. "Mom?" He had a nightmare. He dreamed that Chu Ho was standing in front of him, but she looked like a stranger. She looked at him as if she did not know him and was a stranger. He panicked and wailed. He hugged her, but she pushed him away coldly. "Mom!" Xiaobao cried out in alarm, but he saw Chu Ho turn around and leave. He chased after her in fear, but the road under his feet seemed to be endless. He ran and Chu Ho walked, but he could not catch up. "Mom!" No matter how much he screamed, Chu Ho did not look back. He was so frightened that he did not know what to do. He chased after her desperately, but he could only watch as Chu Ho's back gradually disappeared at the end of his sight. When he was awakened from his nightmare by the sound of thunder, he was already in a cold sweat and trembling. Unknowingly, tears streamed down his face. The more Xiaobao recalled the scene in his dream, the more frightened he became. He rarely dreamed. Even if he did, he would forget everything in the dream when he woke up. However, this dream was extremely clear. Even when he woke up, it was still deeply engraved in his memory. "Mom?" Xiaobao cried sadly. The crying alarmed Gu Jinglian, who was reading in the study. He had the habit of reading before going to bed. When he heard the crying, he walked into the master bedroom and saw Xiaobao covering his eyes and crying bitterly. "Why are you crying again?" Gu Jinglian looked a little unhappy. Why was his son crying all day long? He looked so weak and frail. He was the blood of the Gu family after all. He did not inherit his courage at all. He was like a fragile glass doll. When should he bring him to gain experience? Gu Jinglian cursed silently in his heart. As soon as Chu Xiaobao saw him, he felt a great sense of security in his heart. He got up and threw himself at him. He didn't care that the two of them had an earth-shattering Cold War before. He threw himself into his arms without any scruples. Sob, sob, sob. "Uncle, Mommy doesn't want me anymore. I can't catch up with her no matter how hard I try. She doesn't want me anymore. She just left me like this." When Gu Jinglian saw her throwing herself into his arms so recklessly, he felt as if a soft spot in his heart had been touched. He could not help but reach out his hand and gently stroke the back of his head as a form of consolation. Nightmares? Woo-woo, Chu Xiaobao did not have the concept of a nightmare. He only knew that this dream had shattered all his hopes. Will Mom really abandon me? Why hasn't she come to find me after so long? Is she going to abandon Xiaobao? Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows, but his voice unconsciously softened. No. Really? It's just a nightmare. Be good. Gu Jinglian stroked his hair and said, "Go to sleep. Uncle, you won't abandon me, right?" Xiaobao still looked at him uneasily. Gu Jinglian looked at him and was silent for a moment. Suddenly he smiled and said, "I won't." In this way Xiaobao felt inexplicably relieved. He had just carried him to the bed and covered him with the blanket when his phone suddenly rang. Chapter 2774. What? We don't have enough manpower here. Young Master Gu, you see, trash. Gu Jinglian scolded and hung up the phone. Just as he was about to get up, he saw Xiaobao staring at him with tears in his eyes. Seeing that he was about to leave, he looked scared. "Uncle, where are you going? Are you going to leave me behind too?" Gu Jinglian frowned. Suddenly he thought of something and his lips curled into a cold arc. Didn't he want to train his courage? Wasn't this the best time? Muroga Casino, the biggest casino under the Gu family. Now there was a boiling cauldron of voices and the scene was chaotic. There were cheers and curses mixed in and the mood was high. This was the biggest gambling den in the capital, and also the only casino in the capital that was not controlled by the government. It had always been controlled by the Gu family's Vermilion Bird Hall, and was also the territory of the Gu family's power. At this moment, in the middle of the hall, two groups of people were fighting with their weapons. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, accompanied by angry curses and roars, and the scene was chaotic. The gamblers were all crowded on the second floor in fear. Some people were injured because of the fierce conflict, but because of the chaos they could not get out for a while. They had no choice but to cover their wounds and watch in a panic in front of the railing. Some people were already so scared that their legs were weak. They were half kneeling on the ground, and their faces were pale and colorless. Suddenly there was a clamor from the crowd, with a sense of provocation and arrogance. It was arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Damn it, brothers. Go. Smash it for me. Smash it for me. Take revenge for the brothers of the Green Dragon Group who died in vain. Go. At the command, the people of the Green Dragon Group all pulled out large machetes from their backs. Their faces were ferocious as they waved their machetes and rushed forward. The crowd became more and more chaotic. For a moment there were wails, cries of pain and sounds of fighting. At this moment the door of the casino was suddenly kicked open by someone, accompanied by a deafening gunshot. The gunshot echoed in the hall for a long time, and the scene suddenly became strangely quiet. A group of men in black rushed in from the door, and then respectfully stood in 2 rows, bowing their heads. Then a cold man's voice came from the door. "I heard that someone is causing trouble on my territory?" Just as he finished speaking, there was a sound of casual footsteps at the door, and a tall and slender figure slowly walked in. Everyone was stunned and surprised. Under the gazes of 2 rows of men in black, Gu Jinglian stood tall with his hands in his trouser pockets. His sharp eyes swept across the crowd gathered together and he let out a low chuckle. Green Dragon Group's mood. Or was it because I was not ruthless enough that you dare to stir up trouble under my watch? The man was wearing a black British long windbreaker, a pair of black trousers and a pair of black high boots. His sharp black hair was neatly tied to his ears. He looked neat and free and his whole body exuded an unruly aura. He was obviously a young man, but when he stood there, his every movement showed the demeanor of an emperor. It was as if he was born with an elegant and arrogant temperament. Gu Jinglian looked around at the messy scene, and the corners of his lips curved into a cold arc. Chapter 2775. From the moment he appeared, the crowd fell into a deathly silence. Everyone looked towards the door and their hands froze in place. The people from the Green Dragon Gang were stunned. They were shocked by his imposing manner and stood rooted to the ground, not daring to move. Young Master Gu. It's young Master Gu. A man suddenly exclaimed in surprise and rushed out from the crowd. He quickly ran in front of her and respectfully bowed his body. He lowered his head and said loudly, "Young Master Gu. I don't know what happened today, but the Green Dragon Gang brought people to cause trouble." Before he finished speaking, Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows impatiently and kicked him to the side. The force of the blow was so strong that even the man, who had been fighting in the black streets for many years, could not withstand it. He flew a few meters away and fell to the ground, coughing up a mouthful of blood. "Useless thing." Gu Jinglian arrogantly scolded and walked in front of him. He kicked his shoulder. The man groaned and fell to the ground, his face full of cold sweat. Gu Jinglian walked towards him and his patent leather boots stepped on his chest mercilessly. He coughed and raised his head. He saw a pair of evil eyes shining like a ghost hiding in the night, ghostly and fierce. He narrowed his eyes dangerously. The man was so scared that he hurriedly got up and knelt on the ground, trembling. His shoulders trembled violently. "I said, I don't keep useless people under me," Gu Jinglian said coldly. His amber eyes suddenly flashed with a glimmer of light and there was a touch of disdain in his eyes. He slowly raised his eyes and his sharp gaze swept across the crowd in front of him. His voice was like a bloodthirsty demon. "You dare to cause trouble here, so don't dream of walking out of here alive." After saying that, he raised his chin and signaled with his eyes. The door behind him was closed and locked. A group of men in black took out their pistols neatly and skillfully. The dark holes were aimed at the people from the Green Dragon Gang. At the same time, the gamblers who surrounded the railings on the second floor sucked in a sharp breath. Gu Jinglian looked up expressionlessly and pulled out a pistol from his waist. He pointed it at the crowd and curled his lips impatiently. "I'll shoot whoever makes another sound." His skin was fair and clean, his eyebrows were sword-like and his eyes were upturned. He looked extremely devilish. His facial features were clearly so beautiful and exquisite. His delicate and pretty contours were dyed with traces of cold and sharp heroic spirit because of his cold eyes. Cries of surprise rose and fell from the group of gamblers as they retreated one after another. On the other side, the members of the Azure Dragon group opened up a path. A burly man slowly walked in front of Gu Jinglian. This man was the leader of the Azure Dragon group, known as Long Si. The Dragon Sect was the head of the three major Haidao clans in the capital. It was once an all-powerful clan in the capital, and its reputation spread far and wide. At that time the Dragon Sect and the Gu family stood side by side. They were on par with each other and were feared by other clans. They once had a glorious period. However, since the young master of the Dragon Sect, Long Air, passed away 3 years ago, the Dragon Sect had declined. Their power had greatly weakened and even their status had fallen to the bottom. Chapter 2776. The Long family's bloodline was extremely weak. In the early years, because the Long family's status was unstable, Long Air's first 2 children were assassinated and persecuted. Later on Long Air had a son. However, when Long Air passed away 3 years ago, Long Si was only 16 years old. In order to revive the Long family's prosperity and protect the Dragon Sect's status in the underworld, Long Si had no choice but to rope in other families through marriage a year ago to obtain protection. However, the prosperity of the Dragon Sect was something Gu Jinglian could not bear to see. No emperor would be willing to share the country with others. The capital was his territory. If the Dragon Sect wanted to rise, they had to ask if he could agree. Therefore, a few days ago the Gu family gathered together and took action. In less than 3 days, they wiped out the casino and Jiangnan clubhouse that the Dragon Sect controlled. The Dragon Sect's vitality was greatly damaged. The Jiangnan clubhouse was the Dragon Sect's largest gathering place. On that night, the Dragon Sect's glorious history became a thing of the past. Long Air flew into a rage out of humiliation. Therefore, he gathered his men on this day to bring bad luck to the Gu family. Even if both sides suffered losses and perished together, he would not hesitate. "Young Master Gu, long time no see." Long Air opened his mouth, but his voice was hoarse. When he laughed, he was evil and threatening. Gu Jinglian looked around and frowned slightly. Long Air, sometimes, a last-ditch struggle is not a wise choice. His tone was filled with mockery. Long Air flew into a rage out of humiliation and said angrily, "Cut the crap. Go go." Long Air pointed at Gu Jinglian. "Kill him." The group of people behind Long Air was ready to move. With a command, the group of burly men behind Long Air rushed toward Gu Jinglian at lightning speed. "Gu Jinglian, tonight is the day you die." Gu Jinglian looked at the crowd rushing toward him casually and sneered. Then, he waved his coat away and gently unbuttoned his collar. "Protect young Master Gu." The dragon sex fighters rushed towards him. The man in the lead had a body of terrifying muscles, especially the bulging muscles on his arms. It was as though his clothes were about to burst. He strode over, raised his fist, and smashed it down on Gu Jinglian's face. However, in the next second, Gu Jinglian raised his hand and caught his punch. The man was shocked and looked up, only to see a cold look of contempt in Gu Jinglian's eyes. "You overestimate yourself." In the next second, Gu Jinglian twisted and broke his wrist. "Ah!" The man roared in pain. Gu Jinglian pulled out his gun and aimed it between the man's eyebrows. With a bang, he gave the man a quick death. Blood splattered all over his body, staining it red. Gu Jinglian smiled coldly, but he didn't say much. He waved his hand lightly, and his subordinates immediately swarmed forward. Gu Jinglian was famous for his ruthlessness. The Azure Dragon gang dared to cause trouble in the Gu family's territory, so they naturally cut off their own escape route. Chapter 2777. Bang bang bang. Long Si turned pale with fright. He did not expect Gu Jinglian to be able to mobilize so many people in such a short period of time. The two sides fought fiercely and the scene was intense. Smoke filled the air and blood flowed like a river. Tonight was destined to be a bloody night in Moroga. There were severely injured people lying on the ground. Some of them had already stopped breathing. Most of the gamblers had seen the world, but they had never seen such a grand scene. They could not help but be stunned on the spot. Some of the more timid ones were so scared that they almost peed their pants. Just as the crowd was restless, a child's loud cry suddenly came from outside the closed door. Gu Jinglian paused and silently put away his gun. He signaled to his subordinates with his eyes. As soon as the door was opened, the child's childish cries became louder and louder. A handsome young man rushed in with a crying face holding a child who looked no more than 5 years old. Gu Jinglian took a look and his eyebrows twitched. Dark clouds covered his face. Everyone looked at the child. The man was very tall, so when such a small child nestled in his chest, he looked too small. The boy was very cute. His skin was fair and tender, his hair was black and his eyes were bright and clear. At this moment, there were sparkling tears in his eyes. However, this child was not as soft and weak as she looked. At this moment, she had a fierce expression as she bared her fangs and brandished her claws, tearing at the man's face and hair. She kicked and kicked at the man's arms with her little feet as she cried loudly. The man was called Mummin, and he was one of Gu Jinglian's most trusted subordinates. Now, such a fierce man was carrying such a small child. It was a little out of place. He held up the little child's hands in front of Gu Jinglian as if he was presenting a treasure. "Boss, the young master has been crying non-stop. I can't coax him no matter how hard I try." Mummin frowned in distress. Before he could say anything, Chu Xiaobao in his arms pouted his cherry-red lips and cried out twice. His teary eyes stared innocently at Gu Jinglian. That sad and pitiful look in his eyes made one feel pity for him. Gu Jinglian carried him in his arms with one hand. Chu Xiaobao hugged his shoulders and looked around curiously. Just now he was carried by Mummin outside the door. It was pouring rain outside and thunder was rumbling. He was timid and was scared to tears, crying for Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian did not want the little guy to come into contact with such a scene. However, as the young master of the Gu family, he would definitely see more of such scenes in the future. He soon discovered the corpse lying in a pool of blood in the casino. Confusion flashed across his eyes, but when he recognized the sticky bloodstains on the ground, his face turned ghastly pale in fright. "Uncle. Ugh, so much blood." Mummin looked at the child's shocked expression and could not help but ask worriedly, "Do you want the young master to leave for a while?" "No need." Gu Jinglian sneered. The people of the Gu family have lived a life of licking blood from the tip of a knife since they were young. If they can't even see such a scene, how can they still be considered a member of the Gu family? Chapter 2778. There's no need. Gu Jinglian sneered. The Gu family members have been living on the edge of a knife since young. If they can't even see such a scene, how can they still be considered part of the Gu family? Gu Jinglian carried Xiao Baochu with one hand. His eyes suddenly narrowed dangerously as he cursed silently in his heart. Who gave the Green Dragon gang the courage to come knocking on his door? As he thought about it, he called out, Lin Suong. A response came from the black suit behind him. After a while, a burly man walked out. He lowered his head and walked in front of him. He said in a deep voice, Boss, please give me your orders. Gu Jinglian's fingertips gently caressed the baby's soft cheeks. He said without raising his head, If I remember correctly, Moroga has always been under the jurisdiction of Vermilion Bird Hall. As the hall master of Vermilion Bird Hall, you let me see such a scene today. I'm very unhappy. His strange smile suddenly sent a chill down Lin Suhong's spine. He was a little shocked. Just as he was feeling guilty, he saw the man turn around and glance at him from the corner of his eyes. He said with a smile that was not a smile, You should know that I don't keep useless people under me. You should think about how to protect your position as hall master. His heart suddenly sank. He immediately rushed in front of him and knelt on the ground with a plop. He said with a head full of cold sweat, I'm sorry, boss. What happened tonight was my mistake. Get out of the way. Don't block the way. Gu Jinglian did not even look at him and kicked him to the side. He walked a few steps towards the door and suddenly remembered something. He said coldly, Lin Suong, if you don't clean this place up, don't think about keeping your hands. After saying that, he sneered and walked away with the baby in one hand. He left Lin Suong alone on the ground, trembling with fear. Until Gu Jinglian carried Xiao Baochu out of the door, the child in his arms was still in great fear and trembling all over. So much blood, so much blood. The ground is covered in blood. Chu Xiaobao had never seen such a scene before. However, for as long as Gu Jinglian could remember, he was carried in the arms of his father's subordinates. When he was patrolling the casino, he was not used to seeing such a scene. Those who had their fingers chopped off because of cheating were holding their bloody palms and wailing in pain. The gamblers who had their legs broken and were lying on the ground convulsing from the immense pain. In fact, because of the drug abuse, he was in a state of madness. The scenes of men and women abandoning all restraint were incomparably deep in his memory when he was young. Children who grew up in the Gu family had to experience this from a young age. Chu Xiaobao asked fearfully, Uncle, did you kill those people? Gu Jinglian leaned lazily against the back seat and lowered his head to look helplessly at Xiaobao, who was crying non-stop in his arms. He was physically and mentally exhausted from the crying. He gently ran his long fingers through his hair and sighed in annoyance. It seemed that he had made a wrong decision. It seemed that he should not have brought this child to such an occasion. Looking at him crying and throwing a tantrum, he actually felt a sense of pity for him. Was it an illusion? He actually felt heartache and pity for a person. Could it be that because this child was his flesh and blood, he had developed a feeling of pity for the child? Stop crying. Mammon, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. Chapter 2779. Chu Xiaobao, this guy was his child. When he first learned of this fact, he could not accept it. After all, a little guy who fell from the sky with the same bloodline as him was too sudden, so he could not quickly integrate into the role of a father. He could not help but think that life was really a strange thing. Inexplicably, this child who appeared had his blood flowing in his body. However, he was cold and proud. He had no concept of such a special emotion as family. However, when he saw Chu Xiaobao curled up in the corner of the sofa, dozing off, his head heavy. In the end, he fell clumsily on the sofa. Then he woke up abruptly and got up from the sofa. He rubbed his eyes sleepily. That sleepy and confused look was actually a little simple and honest and cute. Like a little panda. For some reason, the place in his heart softened slightly. For the first time, he realized that such a cute little guy was his son. He walked to the sofa and reached out to ravage his head. In his confusion, Xiaobao reached out his small hand to grab his hand. Such a small hand just happened to hold two of his fingers. It was so soft and cute. This kind of emotion resonated with him. It was really magical. Her hands were so small and tender as if they were carved out of tofu. Her cheeks were pink and had the unique milky fragrance of a child. Her chubby body, especially her belly, was so round that it looked as if it could be broken by the wind. Perhaps it was because she had eaten her fill at dinner. Gu Jinglian looked at him seriously. His eyebrows and eyes were similar to his, but they were not fully open yet. His eyes were black and white, watery and sparkling. His eyelids were slightly red. Perhaps it was because he had cried just now, but his eyelashes were still faintly stained with dew. They were very similar. At first, he did not particularly look at this child. When his subordinate said that this child was similar to him, he did not think much of it. However, after taking a closer look, he realized that they were very similar. Just like a replica of him when he was young. This was his son, Gu Jinglian's son, a descendant of the Gu family. He could not help but outline an unfamiliar arc. It was like tenderness. Seeing him cry, Gu Jinglian finally could not bear it. "Maman." "Yes." Gu Jinglian said, "Bring the little toy from the trunk over." Maman's eyebrows furrowed, and the corner of his lips twitched violently. He turned around and fetched it for him. "Coax him." Gu Jinglian gave the order again. The corner of Maman's lips twitched again. If he was asked to climb a mountain of blades or dive into a sea of fire, he would not hesitate at all. However, wasn't it too much to coax a child? However, despite his misgivings, he still obeyed Gu Jinglian's orders. Shaking the doll in his hand, Maman coaxed and lied to the baby in Gu Jinglian's arms. His voice was as gentle as it could be. "Little master, look at what this is." "Cute." The subordinate standing beside Maman actually wanted to say that the anime seemed to have been outdated a long time ago. Gu Jinglian rubbed his head. After careful consideration, he decided to do it himself and coax this timid little fellow. "Good boy, don't be afraid. It's fake." His words caused the little guy to be surprised. "Ah, fake." Chu Xiaobao stared at him with tears in his eyes. He did not believe him. "Where's the blood?" "It's all ketchup." Chapter 2780. Ketchup. When Chu Xiaobao heard this, he immediately stopped crying and did not feel afraid anymore. In the end, he was easy to deceive. With just a few words, he was coaxed. He blindly believed Gu Jinglian's words and did not doubt them at all. Originally, he was afraid of the smell of blood, but now, because of his few words, his courage gradually grew. "Are you playing a game?" Chu Xiaobao pointed at the blood splattered on his body. "Is this also ketchup?" "Yes." Chu Xiaobao heaved a long sigh of relief and patted his chest lightly. However, he was still breathing rapidly with lingering fear. "I thought you were really a heinous scoundrel. Murder and arson, this kind of scoundrel is very scary." Chu Xiaobao's unintentional words caused Gu Jinglian to be stunned for a moment. "I hate scoundrels," Chu Xiaobao emphasized again. Suddenly, he changed the topic and whispered, "However, Uncle looks like a very elegant gentleman. He must not be a bad person." Gu Jinglian was startled for a long time. He suddenly frowned slightly but seemed to be deep in thought. Maman respectfully walked forward and leaned close to the window. Gu Jinglian stretched out his long fingers and gently rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Without raising his head, he asked coldly, "Is the leader of the Azure Dragon group completely dead?" Maman said, "No, there's still a pulse, but his breathing is very weak." He raised his eyebrows impatiently and curled his lips. "He's not even dead yet. His life is really tough. It's good to keep him. Bring him back. I still have something to ask." "Yes. There's more." Maman was puzzled. "Boss, please give your orders." Gu Jinglian said coldly to Maman, "Don't waste time. Deal with it cleanly." "Yes, sir." "Also, everyone except Long Si, do it for me. Don't leave a single one alive." "Yes, sir." Gu Jinglian frowned and scolded with a gloomy expression. "It's really bad luck to see blood in the middle of the night." The car window rolled up and the car drove away. 2 days later, in the morning, Chu Ho was pushed into the operating room for a minimally invasive surgery. Meng Qingxue waited outside the operating room. She was scared out of her wits. The doctor said that the operation was very risky. However, he refused to say exactly how big the risk was. He only said that the worst-case scenario was that he would end up in a vegetative state. Meng Qingxue wanted to give up on the operation. However, the doctor said that the chances of him becoming a vegetable were very small. It was just that before the surgery, the chief surgeon would habitually report the worst-case scenario in advance so that the family could be mentally prepared. After a second brain CT scan, the doctor said with relief that the blood clot in the brain was not in the ventricle or the skull. This meant that there was no need to use a craniotomy plan for the surgery. However, in order to prevent future problems, it was recommended that she undergo surgery immediately to remove the blood clot in her brain. The cost of the surgery was very high. Chu Ho naturally did not have such wealth. As for Meng Qingxue, she naturally did not have that much savings. She discussed this matter with Mu Yanqing, but Mu Yanqing paid for all the medical expenses without hesitation. Meng Qingxue was very grateful. She hoped that the operation would be successful. It would be best if Chu Ho could recover his original memory. Losing one's memory was a very painful thing. She did not expect Mu Yanqing to agree to it so readily without a second thought. Chapter 2781. He was not so kind-hearted as to pay hundreds of thousands of yuan for an unrelated person's medical expenses for no reason. However, Chu Ho was different. During this period of time, Meng Qingxue had been staying at his house. He had to admit that Chu Ho had taken very good care of her. He wasn't a heartless person and he still had to remember this favor. After all, he did not take good care of his woman. This Chu Ho had taken care of Qingxue for him for a period of time. He had to repay this favor. Moreover, to him, a few 100,000 was an insignificant amount. It was completely insignificant. However, if such an insignificant amount could evoke her gratitude, then it would definitely be worth it. While the operation was still ongoing, Meng Qingxue called Mu Yanqing. Mu Yanqing said that there was a board meeting in the morning and that he needed to attend. Previously, because he had left the capital and was not in the company for a long time, a few senior executives were dissatisfied and criticized him without thinking. Even Mu Linfeng scolded him harshly. Mu Yanqing said that he would rush to the hospital immediately after the meeting. Meng Qingxue hung up the phone, but she felt an inexplicable feeling. Mu Yanqing seemed to be treating her differently than before. In the past, when she called him, he would never pick up when he was busy, let alone when he was in a meeting. Even if he was free, he would not immediately think of coming to her side to accompany her. Just now, he said over the phone that he would come to the hospital to accompany her after the meeting. He had changed. He seemed to be gentler, more considerate and more affectionate toward her than before. She could not get used to this Mu Yanqing in such a short time. Meng Qingxue could not help but think mockingly, could it be that he only feels that he should cherish something when he loses it? She looked up at the lights above the operating theater. The doctor said that the operation would probably last until the afternoon. As it was a relatively major and complicated operation, the process was relatively long. Meng Qingxue looked at the time. It was almost noon and her stomach was a little hungry. Hence, she planned to go to the snack bar to buy some bread and yogurt to fill her stomach. As she was worried about Chu Ho, she was not in the mood to go to a restaurant. Meng Qingxue walked to the snack bar, bought some bread and water and turned to enter the elevator. When she returned to the entrance of the operating theater, she was surprised to see a woman sitting on a bench outside with her arms crossed with an arrogant expression. She was surrounded by several tall men in suits. Meng Qingxue was stunned. She thought that she had gone in the wrong direction. However, when she got closer, the woman sitting on the bench also noticed her. She raised her head and on her face with light makeup, her eyes were extremely sharp and domineering. "You are..." Meng Qingxue did not know her and had never seen her before. However, when she spoke, the woman sneered and said coldly, "So, Meng Qingxue looks like this? I thought you were as beautiful as a fairy. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, that's all there is to it." The moment she opened her mouth, Meng Qingxue was taken aback. It was as if a taut string in her head had snapped. She frowned and uttered the name she had suspected. "Are you Song Enya?" "Oh." Song Enya raised a brow in surprise. "You know me?" Chapter 2782. That name is like thunder to my ears. Meng Qingxue curled her lips and asked bluntly, "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing?" Song Enya was so angry that she laughed. She found the other's question extremely laughable. Her gaze was fixed on the other's stomach as she said fiercely, "Meng Qingxue, since you know who I am, not only do you not show any sense of shame, you even ask me who I am as if it's a matter of course. I'm Mu Yanqing's fiancée and the future young mistress of the Mu Group. We're officially married. What about you? I don't know where this wild vixen came from, but you're delusional enough to snatch my man. Are you even worthy? Mu Yanqing is my fiancé and future husband. Who do you think you are? Wild vixen?" Meng Qingxue burst into laughter when she heard this term. "Song Enya, how can you be so smug? Strictly speaking, you're the real third party, right? Yanqing and I have been dating for 3 years, and our relationship is stable. I don't know what tricks you used to force him to marry you for no reason. Yanqing loves me, not you." Song Enya sneered. "Since you keep saying that Yanqing loves you, why would he rather marry me than give you a status?" Meng Qingxue's words hit the nail on the head and she was at a loss for words. There was a boom. As if she had been struck by lightning, she could not move at all. This was an irrefutable fact. Yes. Mu Yanqing kept telling her how much he cared about her, but he was unwilling to marry her. However, no matter how much he detested Song Enya, she was still his legitimate fiancée. She bit her lip tightly as her face turned pale. She did not know how to refute this. Song Enya continued aggressively, "No matter how unwilling you are to admit this matter, the truth is still the truth. Do you think Mu Yanqing loves you that much? Or do you think that binding you to my side is just because I covet your youth? I admit that you do have some beauty, and Yanqing has taken a fancy to this. He wants to possess you and squander your beautiful youth, but he's unwilling to give you a home. He wants to possess you without restraint, but he's not even willing to give you a status. Don't tell me you really think that this is what love is. He said he loved you, but he wasn't willing to give up his wealth for you. Do you know why Yanqing agreed to marry me? Because with my ability I can give him everything he wants, power, prestige and status. Is this something you can afford to give me? Not only can you not afford it, but for you he might even have to give up his wealth. Right now, the only reason he didn't change his mind was that he hadn't had enough fun yet. When he's tired of you, you'll be nothing more than a withered flower. Shut up. Meng Qingxue couldn't take it anymore. She interrupted her and sneered, So? You traveled thousands of miles to find me just to show off your prowess? I won't fall for that. Withered flower. How could this woman's mouth be so vicious? Ha ha. Song Enya sized her up before her gaze slowly moved down and finally landed on her flat belly. She suddenly mocked, Oh, how could I forget that you're pregnant? What? Did Yanqing ask you to give birth to this child? Didn't he ask you to abort it? Chapter 2783. Tisk tsk tsk. Song Enya shook her head mockingly. If this child is really Yanqing's, it should be very beautiful. However, it's a pity that the mother is disappointing. This child is destined to be a bastard from the moment it's born. Meng Qingxue sneered and retorted, It's not up to you to judge whether it's a bastard or not. I'm just telling the truth. As Song Enya spoke, she stroked her lower abdomen meaningfully and smiled. It's also an unborn child. My child is destined to be doted on the moment it's born. What about the child in your stomach? It's a bastard from the moment it's born. It's destined to have no status for the rest of its life. Even if Yanqing brings the child back to the Mu family out of consideration for their relationship, it will be suppressed by my child for the rest of its life. Ah. Meng Qingxue's face turned pale. Her actions made it seem as if she was already pregnant. She exuded an extremely dazzling motherly glow from head to toe. Even though she knew very well that Song Enya was deliberately faking it. However, she really did not know that Song Enya was pregnant. She looked at Song Enya's lower abdomen suspiciously. It was also flat. If she was pregnant, it was probably not too long ago. You're pregnant? Meng Qingxue was in disbelief. Seeing her puzzled expression, Song Enya's lips curled into a smug smile as she said frankly, Yes. I'm pregnant with Yanqing's child. Meng Qingxue's face turned pale. Song Enya became even more smug when she saw this. She snorted coldly and said, Judging from your expression, you seem very surprised. What? Yanqing didn't tell you about this, did he? Look, he says that he loves you, but he's not even honest with you. In that case, did Yanqing tell you about my pregnancy long ago? Meng Qingxue asked coldly. Song Enya's expression froze. Meng Qingxue suppressed the resentment in her heart and suddenly let out a chilling laugh. Song Enya, I thought you were very capable, but here I am. So, are you using your status and power to blackmail Yanqing into marrying you? Is this what you're capable of? I don't think you're that capable. Otherwise, why would she come all the way here to flaunt her prowess when she's pregnant? I think your relationship with Yanqing is also very distant. What? Song Enya thought that her words would anger the Missy. Unexpectedly, Meng Qingxue did not fall for this trick. Yes, Yanqing did say that he can't marry me, even though my relationship with him is a little shady. But I'm willing to do it. Meng Qingxue paused for a moment and then sneered. Who's the one suppressing who? Song Enya, do you think you're so glorious now that you'll be able to make a comeback? With the passage of time, she was nothing more than a withered flower. At the end of the day, what else do you have other than your own superiority? But I'm different from you. Yanqing really likes to Yanqing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have personally come to Yen City to persuade me to come back. What? Meng Qingxue, you're really shameless. Song Enya was furious. Chapter 2784. As for status, those things are indeed very important. However, what I can't have now doesn't mean that I can't have it in the future. Have you heard of a third party ascending to the top? Song Enya, let's wait and see. I swear that I'll take back everything that originally belonged to me. His heart, his body, I want all of it. Along with my status. Together. If you have the guts, destroy me. Otherwise, I'll take back everything that you have now. You. Song Enya was furious. With nowhere to vent her anger, she bit her lip hard and clenched her fists. Then, with a sinister smile, she said coldly, All of you go. Teach this shameless B***tch a lesson. Let her know what it means by saying that trouble comes from a loose tongue. As soon as she finished speaking, the bodyguards behind her closed in on Meng Qingxue, eyeing her covetously. Meng Qingxue, however, did not show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, she calmly watched as they closed in and surrounded her. The next second, Mu Yanqing's cold voice came from behind. "All of you stop it." Song Enya was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she looked in the direction of the voice and saw Mu Yanqing walking toward Meng Qingxue. When he reached her side, he stopped in his tracks and raised his leg to kick the bodyguard who was about to make a move on Meng Qingxue. "Get lost." The bodyguard did not lose his temper at all and dodged to the side dejectedly. No one would dare to go against the person with the highest authority in the Mu family. Mu Yanqing. Why is he here? She had found out that Meng Qingxue was in this hospital earlier, so she came here with her men. She wanted to take advantage of Mu Yanqing's return to the Mu group for a board meeting to show her who was boss. Yanqing. Song Enya was flustered and exasperated. "I was wondering why I didn't see you these few days. It turns out that you've been with this B*TCH all this time. Have you forgotten about our marriage agreement? Who is this woman? You're not even married yet and you're already flirting with other women. Mu Yanqing, let's see how you're going to explain this to me." She spoke in a righteous manner as if she was a first wife who had caught an adulterer in the act. The man swept a cold glance at her and sneered. "Song Enya, we're not married yet. There wasn't even an engagement. Don't talk to me in such a tone. You don't have the qualifications to do that. You." Song Enya sneered in anger. "Are you speaking up for this wild woman? Don't forget that I'm your legitimate fiancé." Shut up. Mu Yanqing was obviously protecting Meng Qingxue, and his tone toward Song Enya was extremely nasty. Song Enya's heart ached even more when she saw this. When Meng Qingxue saw him, she immediately hugged him aggrievedly. Burying her head in his chest, she sobbed, "Yanqing, you're here. You came at the right time. If you came one step later, I'm afraid I won't be able to keep the child in my stomach." "You know what?" she said, "I'm a wild vixen, you're playing with my feelings." She even said that the child in my stomach was a bastard and that it would be a bastard the moment it was born. But I don't understand. If this child is a bastard, then as the child's father, wouldn't she be insulting you? I couldn't stand it, so I retorted a few times. She flew into a rage and said that she wanted to abort my child. I was so scared. She pretended to be weak and helpless. Mu Yanqing's heart ached when he saw this. Chapter 2785. This B*TCH really knows how to sow discord. When did she say that she wanted to get rid of the child in her womb? Bastard child? When Mu Yanqing heard this, he laughed out of anger. He glanced coldly at Song Enya and said without thinking, "If Qingxue is pregnant with a bastard child, then what about the one in your womb? At the very least, the child in her womb was personally conceived by me. Let me tell you, I admit to this child. Furthermore, I'll take good care of it. As for the child in your womb, I've never touched you. What dirty and despicable means did you use to conceive it? You know very well in your heart." What? Meng Qingxue seized the opportunity to ask. "She said that the child in her womb is yours? What? Isn't it yours?" "The child is mine. But I've never touched her," Mu Yanqing said coldly. "As for how the child came about, she knows very well in her heart." Mu Yanqing. Song Enya could not take it anymore and questioned hysterically, "Must you stand on her side and defend her? Mu Yanqing, do you have a conscience? I'm pregnant with your child too. No matter how this child came about, it's still your flesh and blood and has your blood flowing in it. How can you be so cruel and heartless?" Cruel and heartless. Mu Yanqing sneered. "Song Enya, don't make it sound so dignified. It's as if I have to marry you. You have to know that if you hadn't used such despicable means, I wouldn't have taken a liking to a filthy woman like you. I'm warning you, don't play any more tricks. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude to you." "You." She could not refute his coldness. She could not help but clench her fists so hard that her sharp nails almost dug into her palms. She sucked in a few breaths of cold air and suddenly said fiercely, "Mu Yanqing, you win. Just you wait and see." With that, the Missy stormed off in a huff. The bodyguards behind her exchanged glances before hurrying after her and soon disappeared from their sight. It was only after Song Enya left that Meng Qingxue regained her cool demeanor. She pushed him away unhappily and walked to the side with an awkward look on her face. Mu Yanqing walked over and held her shoulders. Straightening her body, he asked patiently, "What's wrong? Did she make you angry?" "What else?" Meng Qingxue smiled faintly. "Mu Yanqing, you're really amazing. Do you think it's still ancient times? Do they still practice polygamy? Today there was Song Enya. Tomorrow there would be another Li Enya. What should I do? I don't even have a status. Do I deserve to be trampled under their feet? Don't overthink it. However, Meng Qingxue did not listen to his superficial words. Instead, she asked, "Is the child in her stomach yours?" Mu Yanqing was stunned for a moment before he nodded. "Yes." Meng Qingxue clenched her fists and hit him hard. "How could you do this?" Mu Yanqing immediately grabbed her punching hands and explained, "Qingxue, things aren't what you think. Didn't I say just now that I didn't lay a finger on her?" Chapter 2786. She stole someone else's sperm to conceive that child. Mu Yanqing interrupted her. Meng Qingxue widened her eyes in shock. "What? You should know that I have a second brother." Mu Yanqing decided to come clean with her about this matter. "Song Enya is in love with my second brother and wants to marry him wholeheartedly." This woman's abacus was extremely shrewd. How did she do it? Behind everyone's back, she secretly stole Mu Yaja's sperm from the Mu family sperm bank and went to America for artificial insemination. After that, just as she wished, she successfully got pregnant. But no matter how good she is at scheming, how can she scheme against that second brother of mine? Mu Yaja secretly did something behind her back and destroyed his sperm from the bank long ago. Song Enya used my sperm to conceive the child. What? Meng Qingxue turned pale with fright. This was ridiculous. This was even more bizarre than the bizarre plots in the television drama she had watched. Sperm? Artificial insemination. How could that woman do such a thing? Shameless. Song Enya even accused the child in her womb of being a bastard. Then what was the child in her womb? The child in her womb was the one with an unknown origin. How did you know about this? Meng Qingxue asked suspiciously. Since you knew, why didn't you force her to abort the child in her womb? I didn't know about this before. After all, I wasn't very familiar with her at that time. Mu Yanqing also felt wronged. If I had known, I would have done it long before the Song family found out about this. Would I have waited until now? Then what exactly is going on? Meng Qingxue sneered. What ability does that woman have to pin this on you? Hee hee. She was kept in the dark from the start too. That second brother of mine is quite capable. He stole the sky and swapped the sun without anyone noticing. Song Enya was overjoyed after she got pregnant. However, when she returned to the country in high spirits and eagerly went to Mu Yaja to tell him the truth, Mu Yaja refused to admit that the child in her stomach was his. Song Enya took out the DNA test report, but because I'm related to Mu Yaja by blood, no matter how the child is tested, it's definitely related to Mu Yaja. He paused for a moment before his expression turned frosty. After all her scheming, Song Enya probably knew that it was impossible between her and Mu Yaja anymore. So, she schemed against me again. Since the child in her stomach is not Mu Yaja's, my shrewd second brother will naturally not admit it. But the child had to have a status and a father. He couldn't just abort it. She's the city's young lady. If news of her abortion were to spread, it would bring shame to the Song family. So she schemed against me. That night, I bumped into her at a bar. She spiked my drink and brought me to a hotel. The next day she slandered me for sleeping with her. At first I was kept in the dark. But after that I specially sent someone to investigate this matter. I didn't expect to be set up from the start. So? Meng Qingxue could not help but feel indignant when she heard this. Why did you marry such a woman? Chapter 2787. Mu Yanqing's expression was a little solemn. I just got promoted and didn't have a strong foundation. If I were to marry into the Song family, my position would be stabilized. Hence, I obeyed my second uncle's wishes and agreed to marry her. Meng Qingxue bit her lip hard. She could not take it lying down. She could not take it lying down. At the end of the day, it's because I'm a commoner with no status or background that I can't be with you, right? Meng Qingxue smiled coldly and suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. How ridiculous. What's the point of marriage? Isn't it because of love? What a joke. Mu Yanqing suddenly stopped talking. Seeing that he did not speak, Meng Qingxue felt a chill in her heart. She suddenly turned around and sat back on the bench in silence. However, the tears in her eyes could not be stopped. What Song Enya said was right. He could love her and give her all the glory and wealth, but he could not give her the most basic status. What was the difference between her and a canary if she stayed by his side? She swore that she would snatch Mu Yanqing back from Song Enya. Unfortunately, she did not have a family background like Song Enya's. Just the word family background was enough to crush her powerlessly. Mu Yanqing walked over and sat down beside her. He reached out his long arms and pulled her into his embrace. Qingxue, don't think too much. I can swear to you that I have no feelings for Song Enya at all. Everything can't even be considered as an act. In the future, I won't be like before and indulge in debauchery outside. I can promise you that from now on, I'll only have you and treat you well. I'll take good care of you. Mu Yanqing promised her again and again. I'll only have you in the future. There won't be any other woman. Qingxue, I'll definitely keep my promise. This is my promise to you. You can give me everything but you can't marry me. Meng Qingxue suddenly became agitated. Why are you so obsessed with marriage? Mu Yanqing asked in puzzlement. Meng Qingxue's expression suddenly froze. She looked at him bitterly. Then what should I be obsessed with? Isn't marriage where love belongs? Wasn't this natural? This was a title and also a basic respect for me. Mu Yanqing, do you even know what I need? Mu Yanqing looked at her expressionlessly in silence. Seeing that he was silent, Meng Qingxue felt even more wronged. Suddenly she sucked in a breath of cold air. Her eyes were slightly red as she said calmly, I saw the news some time ago. Mu Yaja's fiancée is that popular A-list actress Yun Shishir. I know that Mu Yaja is your second brother. I also know that he was willing to give up everything in the Mu group, including that glorious title, for Yun Shishir's sake. When I saw it, I was really touched. I was envious of Yun Shishir for being married to love. But I know that this kind of utopian love is something that can only be hoped for but not achieved. But to be honest, when I saw the news, I was so envious that my eyes were about to pierce through. Why can Yun Shishir be so happy while I can only live lowly? Mu Yanqing suddenly interrupted him coldly. Are you blaming me? Mu Yanqing asked again, or are you blaming me for being useless? Chapter 2788. Meng Qingxue looked up at him in surprise, only to see that his face was cold. It was no longer as gentle and warm as before and was filled with unfamiliar hostility. Now that she was pregnant, no matter what she said, he would go along with it. Even if he had to coax or lie to her, he would never let her suffer. However, his pride could not tolerate comparing him to Mu Yaja. When he was young in the Mu family, Mu Yaja was the one who was compared the most. He had heard the name Mu Yaja so many times that his ears were about to grow calluses. This name was shrouded in a halo, like a high and mighty god, unreachable. Some people were born with outstanding talent, such as Mu Yaja. Some people were not talented enough, such that even if they worked hard later on, it would be difficult for them to surpass them, such as him. It was not that he did not work hard, but no matter how hard he worked, he could not catch up to this man. Of all the things she shouldn't have done, the thing she shouldn't have done the most was to compare him with that man. However, it did not matter who compared him to Mu Yaja. It just had to be her. It just had to be the person closest to him. Since you think Mu Yaja is better, why did you choose me? Meng Qingxue's face turned pale for a moment, and she could not say anything. Qingxue, do you know why I want to marry Song Enya? Mu Yanqing smiled wickedly and said word by word, because only by relying on the power of the Song family can I help. I've just risen to power and don't have a strong foundation, so I need a marriage alliance to strengthen my background. Do you understand? Meng Qingxue could not take it anymore and asked, are the so-called power, status, glory, and wealth really that important? Power, status, glory, and wealth? Not important. Mu Yanqing sneered. Do you still remember? Back then, when you signed with the modeling agency, how much did I have to pay for the breach of contract? Meng Qingxue's lips trembled. 300,000. What I didn't tell you was that the boss of the modeling agency raised the price and demanded 2 million before he would let you go. If I hadn't used some means to pressure them, 300,000? Do you want to leave? Do you remember the man you offended at the bar? Meng Qingxue recalled for a while in a daze. That's right. Back when she had accompanied Mu Yanqing to a bar, a middle-aged man happened to be sitting in the private room next door. When Mu Yanqing was dragged away to socialize, the man took the opportunity to take advantage of her under the influence of alcohol. In a fit of anger, she gave him 2 tight slaps across the face, causing the old man's eardrums to perforate. However, she did not expect him to be a high-ranking official in a certain company. In a fit of anger, he decided to teach her a lesson. In the end, I also used some means to suppress it. If I had no power or influence, what would you do? Until now, you will still be tied up by the modeling agency and sold to those old and fat men at a high price. Meng Qingxue's shoulders trembled violently. Mu Yanqing's face turned ashen again. Speaking of which, you're asking me how important wealth is. If I weren't Mu Yanqing and didn't have that kind of wealth, where would you have paid for your friend's surgery fees? After the child is born, the child's maintenance fees, nutrition fees, and confinement fees, can you do that with magic? Do you really have a place to stay in such a big city? Aha. Stop joking. Meng Qingxue was stunned again. Chapter 2789. Mu Yanqing suddenly sneered. Meng Qingxue, don't put yourself on such a high pedestal. Power, glory and wealth. Which man doesn't yearn for such things? Yes. I don't have Mu Yaja's boldness. I can't give up everything for a woman. I don't have his capability either. Even if I leave the Mu family, I can still obtain everything on my own. Yes. I'm incompetent. I don't have Mu Yaja's sense of responsibility. I'm incompetent and weak. If it weren't for Mu Yaja giving up that position, I wouldn't have the capability to be at the helm of Dishing Financial Group. Are you satisfied with what I've said? His self-esteem was being trampled on by her. All along, Mu Yanqing had prided himself on being contradictory. Being born into the Mu family, he had a sense of superiority, but being compared to Mu Yaja made him feel inferior. The combination of the two contradicted and repelled each other. Finally, there was a glimmer of hope. He tried his best to grasp it, but he did not expect that the woman closest to him would give him such a rude awakening. Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip hard. I didn't mean that. Meng Qingxue, do you know? I'm doing this because I promised myself that I'll give you and the child in your tummy the best life possible. I can promise you that I won't lay a finger on Song Enya, much less any other woman. What are your intentions though? Why do you have to trample on my self-esteem like this? Mu Yanqing's body stiffened and tensed up after venting his anger. Under his shirt, the lines of his muscles could be clearly seen, as if they were filled with anger. Meng Qingxue also knew that she had said something wrong. She was flustered and vexed. She wanted to explain herself, but she did not know where to start. Yanqing, calm down. Meng Qingxue hesitated for a moment before spitting out a few words with difficulty. I said something wrong. It seems that you haven't considered our relationship properly, Mu Yanqing said with a livid face. He stood up abruptly and turned to leave without looking back. Yanqing. When Meng Qingxue saw that he just walked away, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. She got up and wanted to chase after him. However, the surgical lights behind him suddenly went out. The door suddenly opened. When Meng Qingxue heard the commotion, she turned around and saw that the door of the operating theater was wide open. A group of medical staff pushed a bed out in a hurry. She looked anxiously in the direction where Mu Yanqing had left and then at Chu Ho, who was being wheeled out by a group of nurses. After a moment of hesitation, she clenched her fists tightly and walked toward the chief surgeon. Doctor, how was the surgery? Was it successful? The doctor glanced at her and saw tears on her face. He thought that she was worried and afraid, so he immediately comforted her. Miss, don't worry. The operation was a success. However, the patient will have to be transferred to the intensive care unit immediately. After the surgery, he has to rest well until the infection period passes. Meng Qingxue's mind was still firmly occupied by Mu Yanqing's words just now. She only knew that Chu Ho's surgery was very successful. While she was happy, she was also distracted by Mu Yanqing's words. Meng Qingxue asked tentatively, then, is the medical fees enough? When the doctor heard this, he was stunned and asked doubtfully, the gentleman who was with you previously paid for all the expenses. He paid 300,000 yuan in one go. Didn't you know? Chapter 2790. Meng Qingxue was stunned as if she had been struck by lightning. If you don't have any wealth, will you be able to conjure up the money for your friend's surgery? Wasn't the doctor's words a wake-up call for her as well? Meng Qingxue's heart suddenly clenched. Her breathing quickened and she was about to suffocate. Got it? Then, thank you, doctor. Don't worry. If you recover well and recuperate well, you should be able to regain your memory soon. Meng Qingxue clenched her fists and nodded blankly. After settling the procedures, Chu Ho was quickly transferred to the ward. Meng Qingxue stood by the bed absent-mindedly. Looking at Chu Ho, who was still under general anesthesia, her mind was filled with Mu Yanqing's angry words. What are you up to? Why do you have to trample on my self-esteem like this? Meng Qingxue suddenly broke down. Covering her face with both hands, she weakly retorted, I didn't. I really didn't. Chu Ho could not hear her muttering now. She was wearing an oxygen tube and her eyes were tightly shut. Her face was dead calm. Chu Ho, what should I do? Meng Qingxue gritted her teeth. I hope he knows that even if he has nothing, I'm still willing to be with him. However, I can't refute what he said at all. But, he really misunderstood what I meant. In the darkness, Chu Ho felt as if she was drowning in a black ocean. She was bobbing up and down as if she was drowning in the water. She opened her eyes in a daze, only to see endless darkness. It was as if her soul had left her body and was floating in mid-air, without a sense of belonging. Where am I? Where am I? In a daze, Chu-ho seemed to hear someone calling her name. Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird. This was not her name at all. It was very unfamiliar, yet it felt familiar at the same time. It was gently calling out to her, and she actually had an unimaginable sense of belonging. Officer Vermilion Bird. Here. The Secretary General invites you to his office. He has an important talk. I'll be right there. Chu-ho looked in the direction of the voice and saw a woman who looked exactly like her. She was wearing a well-ironed uniform. She was tall and her back was straight. Her uniform was full of heroic spirit, which made her look fierce and valiant. On the armband was the symbol of Interpol, a sharp sword piercing through the earth and a scale pole, symbolizing the supreme majesty and justice. His field of vision gradually cleared, and what entered his eyes was a tall building filled with a majestic aura. The building was squarish, like a silver fortress, towering and magnificent. At the entrance of the building, the English logo Interpol was extremely eye-catching. Interpol was the second largest international organization in the world after the United Nations. It was also the largest police organization in the world. They play an irreplaceable role in deepening police cooperation and cracking down on transnational crimes. Interpol, or ICPO for short, was established in 1923. It was originally called the International Criminal Police Committee, and its headquarters was set up in Vienna, the capital of Austria. Chapter 2791. On the second floor after the war, the criminal police of France, England, and Belgium established a new organization and continued to use the original name of Interpol. After 1956, the Interpol moved to Lyon, France, and changed its name to Interpol. As the second largest international organization, Interpol maintained a neutral position. It would not intervene in politics, military, religion, or non-transnational crimes. Its goal was to put the safety of the world's people first, and its main goal was to investigate international terrorism. Terrorist activities, organized crimes such as drugs. Let's go. Private army fire black money, high-tech crimes, transnational corruption, and other crimes. Interpol held a plenary meeting every year and often held various international and regional seminars. The organization maintained a close relationship with the Central Bureau of each country and organized international manhunts. Was an emergency warrant used by Interpol to fight international crimes. One of the most important branches of Interpol was the Anti-Mafia Group. As the top anti-mafia inspector in the organization, Vermilion Bird's name was prominent. President's office. Vermilion Bird stood at the door and gently knocked. Come in. Vermilion Bird pushed the door open and walked to the desk. She looked at the middle-aged Asian man sitting on the chair and raised her hand to salute him. Sir. This man was the new president of Interpol, Liu Yanwei. At the 85th plenary meeting of Interpol held in India, Liu Yanwei, the Minister of Public Security, was elected as the new president for a 4-year term. He was the first Chinese president of Interpol since its establishment 100 years ago. Liu Yanwei glanced at her and didn't say much. He handed her a craft paper letter without exchanging too many pleasantries. I have a task for you. Vermilion Bird opened the envelope expressionlessly. It was a thick stack of documents, and the red label on the upper right corner was very eye-catching. This was a red notice. Interpol issued various notices, including the most famous Red Notice, which could prevent criminals from traveling across borders. Red Notice, commonly known as Red Notice, was one of the 7 international notices issued by Interpol members when they requested assistance from other countries to investigate crimes. It was named after the red emblem on the upper left corner of the notice. It was the highest level of emergency warrants. The other 6 were blue, green, yellow, black, orange, and purple. Bulletins were issued in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, the official working languages of the organization. In addition, Interpol and the United Nations jointly issued special arrest warrants, mainly for the relevant persons sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. The arrest warrant was jointly issued by the Director of the Interpol Central Bureau and the Secretary General of the Interpol General Secretariat of the country concerned. It could be regarded as an international certificate that allowed for temporary detention. The order was valid for 5 years and could be renewed until the criminal was apprehended. Upon receiving the red notice, The Central Bureau of each Interpol member can immediately arrest and detain the wanted persons and conduct international extradition with reference to the relevant laws of their respective countries. Gu Jinglian? The vermilion bird looked up, her eyes filled with confusion. Chapter 2792. Among them, the most sensational case was an international trafficking case. It was so big that it even alerted the FBI. This person is not ordinary. Lu Yanwei took a puff of his cigarette and flicked the ash away. The Gu family's influence in our country is not to be underestimated. However, I didn't expect them to be so rampant in recent years. If we don't stop them, I'm afraid they will become a cancer in the international criminal world. Vermilion Bird furrowed her brows and stuffed the documents into the envelope. She asked indifferently, "Sir, what orders do you have?" "I'll leave this task to you." "What should I do?" Zhu Ke was at a loss. The ICPO placed so much importance on this case. Gu Jinglian was not to be underestimated. Lu Yanwei crossed his arms and looked at her. He suddenly smiled. "Vermilion Bird, as the top anti-corruption inspector, you have made outstanding achievements in the past 3 years. That's because you were an intelligence agent before this job, right?" Vermilion Bird smiled. "Yes. Since that's the case, as an intelligence agent, you should be good at sneaking into the enemy's camp to gather information," Lu Yanwei said. "Sir, do you mean that you want me to sneak into the Gu family as a spy? It's not enough to just have a criminal record. His crimes have been appealed by the Nuremberg military court. We need sufficient evidence to convict him." As Lu Yanwei spoke, he looked at her deeply. "I think Officer Vermilion Bird should be able to give me a perfect answer. I understand what you mean." Zhu Ke saluted meticulously. "I'll go prepare." Zhu Ke turned around and left the office. Behind her, Lu Yanwei smiled satisfactorily. Chu Ho looked at Zhu Ke's figure disappearing at the end of the seemingly endless corridor with a puzzled expression. The image rippled like the surface of the water again. In the end, it was an old house. Zhu Ke became a spy under the alias of Red Lotus, and successfully sneaked into the Gu family. The Gu family was divided into 4 main halls. Green Dragon, White Tiger, Black Tortoise, and Zhu Quebec Luoxing Hall was a branch of Black Tortoise Hall. Zhu Ke sneaked into Luoxing Hall under the alias of Red Lotus, and quickly gained the trust of Luoxing Hall's hallmaster Luo Xingjie. At night, the night wind was bone-chilling. The main residence of the Gu family was located in an old and prosperous manor. The scenery here was unique, and it was far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was a rare and peaceful place. 100 years ago, this place was densely packed with aristocratic mansions. The Gu family, which had 100 years of history, was also an aristocratic family. With the passing of time, this piece of land had become the most desired and unattainable place in the capital. However, in this piece of land where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, the Gu clan's old mansion had tyrannically occupied a considerable amount of land by relying on its incredible power. At this moment, dozens of luxurious cars were parked by the roadside at the entrance of the Gu family's mansion, forming a long black line. Dozens of burly men in black suits stood at the entrance with cold expressions. The scene was particularly spectacular and had a somewhat domineering aura. Chapter 2793. Regarding the ascension of the family head, the current head of the Gu family, Gu Lianqing, once again gathered all the ministers, elders, and hall masters of the 4 halls for a cabinet meeting. At the mention of Gu Lianqing, people said that the Mu and Gu families had different surnames but the same name. Although the Gu and Mu families did not have any feud, the 2 families had a sense of tit-for-tat. When Mu Sheng was happy to have a son and named Mu Lianqing, it was during Mu Lianqing's 100th birthday celebration, which coincided with Gu Lianqing's birth. At that time, Old Master Gu invited a famous feng shui master to test the name. The feng shui master said that Gu Lianqing was unlucky and had an ominous fate. His life was full of misfortune, and he was incompatible with Old Master Gu. Naming was a great art. It defied the heavens and changed one's fate. The feng shui master received a large sum of money and named the newborn child Gu Lianqing. This way, the ominous aura of this child's fate would be transferred to Mu Lianqing. Hence, Old Master Gu decided to give Gu Lianqing the same name. Sure enough, Mu Lianqing died young, which fulfilled the feng shui master's words. The Gu family was the head of the 4 major families. It was once an all-powerful family with an illustrious reputation. At that time, the Gu family could be said to be an existence that owned half of the country. The other families were wary of them and had once enjoyed a period of glory. However, since the young head of the Gu family, Gu Lianqing, was bedridden for a long time 3 years ago, it had declined even further. When Gu Lianqing's illness was critical, Gu Jinglian was only 20 years old. At that time, if Gu Lianqing passed away, Gu Jinglian would naturally be the one to inherit the Gu family's ruling power. There were only two conditions to inherit the Gu family's head. One of them was to be a legitimate son. At that time, Gu Lianqing only had two sons. One was Gu Jinglian, and the other was a concubine's son, Gu Xingze. Gu Xingze was born and raised abroad because of his concubine's identity. When he was very young, he was summoned back to the Gu family by Gu Lianqing. However, not long after, Gu Lianqing was bedridden. Gu Xingze had no power to compete at all. Gu Jinglian did not take Gu Xingze seriously at all. Even if Gu Lianqing wanted to help him ascend the throne, everyone in the Hall of Elders would probably oppose it. In the Gu family's 100 years of history, there had never been a precedent of a concubine becoming the head of the family. Gu Xingze would never have had the opportunity to create such a precedent. In order to ensure the prosperity of the Gu family, Gu Lianqing originally wanted to use a marriage alliance. At that time, Gu Jinglian was young and impetuous. He was willful and self-willed. No matter how Gu Lianqing coerced him, Gu Jinglian suddenly left a letter the day before the engagement and left without saying goodbye. He left for a year. During this year, Gu Jinglian's condition deteriorated rapidly. Soon he was beyond cure. An urgent email summoned Gu Jinglian back. Gu Jinglian did not arrive on the boat at 10 o'clock in the evening. However, at that moment, dozens of men in black suits stood neatly on both sides of the hall, which was hundreds of square meters in size. The Gu family's retainers and elders, as well as the four hall masters, sat upright and still. Their gazes were focused on Gu Lianqing, who was sitting at the head of the table. Gu Lianqing even had a hard time sitting down. He sat awkwardly on the imperial dragon-carved wooden chair with a gloomy expression. Chapter 2794. After drinking a cup of tea, he slowly opened his mouth. I've gathered everyone here today for no other reason than that it's time to make a decision. Gu Lianqing paused. To decide on the new head of the Gu family. Beijing Victoria Harbor. A row of black cars was parked quietly by the harbor. Late at night, everything was silent. The evening breeze of early autumn brought with it a bone-chilling coldness. A few rows of men in black suits stood side by side beside the cars. The doors of the cars were tightly shut, and a lazy figure could be faintly seen through the black rear seat window. Not far away, the sound of horns came from afar. Silver cars drove side by side and stopped at the harbor. A group of men in black got out of the cars and walked towards them. A tall man in a suit walked to the car door, bowed respectfully and said in a deep voice, "Young master, Luo Xingjie and the rest are here." The car window slowly rolled down, revealing a handsome and delicate face. Gu Jinglian was wearing sunglasses, but his exquisite facial features could still be seen. They were so perfect that there was not a single flaw to be found. A pair of sharp eyebrows casually raised, and his sexy thin lips curled up wickedly. Just the curvature of his lips revealed the aura of an emperor. It was as if he was born with it. The car door opened, revealing two slender legs. The man was wearing slim trousers and a pair of black Baroque boots. He casually put on a black windbreaker and stepped out of the car gracefully. His figure was extremely tall and slender. Even though he was dressed in simple clothes, he was already very charming. However, when Luo Xingjie walked closer, he realized that this man was holding a beautiful and cute ragdoll cat in his arms. Now this ragdoll cat seemed to be still in a deep sleep. It seemed to be satisfied, and its four little paws were constantly stretched out. Its expression was lazy and docile, and it occasionally let out a few childish murmurs. A person as arrogant as an emperor was holding such a petite cat in his arms. The scene in front of him was really a little strange. However, when Gu Jinglian looked up, the coldness that flashed in the corner of his eyes made Luo Xingjie realize that this man was indeed Gu Jinglian. He was slightly startled and suddenly felt that the man in front of him was somewhat unfamiliar. In his memory, Gu Jinglian was cold and taciturn. However, when she looked at the man in front of her again, even though he was silent, his body still emitted a kind of sharpness that could stab people. Zhu Kei, who was hiding among Luo Xingjie's subordinates, raised her head and observed. This was her first meeting with Gu Jinglian. In her memory, when she first met this man, there was a sense of pride that even the darkness of the night could not blaspheme. There were very few words that could accurately describe him. If one had to describe it, then his insufferably arrogant temperament would definitely replace the first impression of his handsome features. Gu Jinglian lazily hugged the cat with one hand and casually stuffed the other into the pocket of his windbreaker. There was a lit cigarette in the corner of his mouth, and there was an elegant smile on his face. He couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. Luo Xingjie smiled and said, "Young master, why did you suddenly come back? Where have you been for the past year? The family head has been looking for you to the ends of the earth." Gu Jinglian said, "I just received news that father is holding a meeting of the elders' cabinet today to announce the new family head." Chapter 2795. I just came back to take back what belongs to me. Vermilion Bird's heart skipped a beat. This cabinet meeting was called because Gu Lianqing knew that he had been ill for a long time and that his time was almost up. Therefore he hurriedly summoned Gu Jinglian back to the Gu family and handed over the power to him while he still had the strength to do so. Although the elders of the Gu family looked dignified on the surface, which one of them wasn't eyeing the position of the Gu family's head covetously? Gu Lianqing's illness hadn't recovered for a long time. Could it really be fate? How could he not know who was the one behind his illness? He had been ill for so long, but his illness was getting worse and worse until he was beyond cure. All the elders of the Gu family coveted the power in his hands. How could he let these people have their way? Therefore he tried his best to hold on until Gu Jinglian returned and officially announced that he had inherited the position of the Gu family head. Luo Xinghal was ordered to come and welcome him, but Gu Lianqing didn't know that Luo Xingjie already had rebellious thoughts. Luo Xingjie smiled slyly and suddenly took a step back. The men in black surrounding Gu Jinglian all raised their pistols and pointed the black muzzles between his eyebrows. Gu Jinglian's face was calm as he looked at him indifferently. The corners of his lips were still curved in a devilish smile, as if these weapons pointing at him were useless. His thin lips opened slightly and a cold and charming voice overflowed from his lips. "Luo Xingjie, what do you mean by this? You can't even see that? Today will be the day you die." As he spoke, Luo Xingjie's eyes revealed a sinister and ruthless light. "I didn't expect that the Gu family's eldest young master, who ran away from home more than a year ago, would still have the leisure to care about the Gu family's matters. I am a member of the Gu family. Shouldn't I care about my own family's matters?" Gu Jinglian had a playful look in his eyes. He glanced at the men in black surrounding him and said casually, "Interesting. I didn't expect that you would need to mobilize such a big force to welcome me." Luo Xingjie didn't say anything. Gu Jinglian suddenly curled his lips into a mocking smile and slowly took off his sunglasses. A pair of long, narrow and enchanting phoenix eyes curved upwards. His deep pupils suddenly flashed a bright and magnificent light, and there was a touch of arrogance and contempt in his eyes. "Looks like someone is even more concerned about the position of the Gu clan's patriarch than I am." Gu Jinglian gently stroked the cat's soft fur with his fingertips and said with a faint smile, "My death date." Pausing for a moment, his voice suddenly turned cold. "Just whose time of death it is, I'll have to wait and see." His strange smile suddenly sent a chill down Luo Xingjie's spine, and he was somewhat shocked. Luo Xingjie sneered and threatened in a loud voice, "One more step and your young master's head will explode. Move back." Gu Jinglian's men didn't listen to him and continued to close in on him. However, in the next second, a woman's calm voice cut through the night. "No one move." Everyone was shocked and looked towards the voice. They saw a woman in a red dress who had somehow broken through the heavy encirclement. The muzzle of the gun in her hand was accurately pointed at Gu Jinglian's temple. Gu Jinglian's men were even more shocked and wanted to rush forward. The woman shouted coldly again, "Don't come near." Gu Jinglian couldn't help but look at her again. Chapter 2796. The woman was wearing a dark red windbreaker and a black tank top. She was tall and well-proportioned. Her black hair was tied up with a hairband, making her look even more neat. He had never seen a woman who could wear red clothes so perfectly. Not every woman was suitable for red. However, her skin was fair, and any color on her would bring out a noble temperament. Zhu Ke held the gun tightly and pressed it between his eyebrows. When she saw his gaze sweep over, there was no fear in her eyes. She was not afraid of him. How rare. There had never been a woman who was not afraid of his sharp and forceful gaze when they first met. "You're a subordinate of Luo Xinghal?" Gu Jinglian sized her up. "You don't look familiar." "Young Master Gu, you're about to die. Do you have any last words for me?" Luo Xingjie asked proudly. Zhu Ke had used the alias Red Lotus to infiltrate the Gu family as a spy. Her ability was top-notch, and she quickly gained Luo Xingjie's attention. Coupled with her beautiful appearance, she was in the limelight in the Gu family. There were very few female disciples in the Gu family. However, women like Zhu Ke were few and far between. Gu Jinglian completely ignored Luo Xingjie and sized up Zhu Ke with a faint gaze. Suddenly, he curled his lips into a faint smile. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Zhu Ke's eyes suddenly had a hint of hesitation. This hesitation fell into his eyes. Red Lotus. Kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, Luo Xingjie signaled with his eyes. His subordinates tightened their encirclement, and the black muzzle was aimed at the center of the woman's eyebrows. As long as Luo Xingjie gave the order, the man in front of him would become a corpse. Red Lotus? So this woman's name was Red Lotus. Gu Jinglian curled his lips slightly and suddenly lowered his head. He gently leaned close to Mao'er's ear and said casually, Red Lotus, kill him. Young Master Gu, could it be that you're mistaken? Red Lotus is my subordinate. She will never betray me. You betrayed father, so why are you so sure that your subordinates won't betray you? Gu Jinglian asked slowly. Luo Xingjie laughed wildly, but before he could enjoy himself, Vermilion Bird suddenly turned around and pointed the gun at him. Along with the sound of a silenced gunshot, a bullet pierced through his forehead with a bang sound, piercing through his skull and injuring several of his subordinates behind him. Gu Jinglian's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. He pulled off the windbreaker draped over his shoulders with one hand. In the blink of an eye, the port was filled with smoke. Luo Xinghal's plan was very good, but it didn't mean that Gu Jinglian would let himself be schemed against. When he returned to the Gu family this time, he had made thorough preparations. He had long expected that there would be people who would want to rebel. He also knew that the road back to the Gu family would not be peaceful. Therefore the subordinates by his side were all top battle generals. In less than 10 minutes, Luo Xinghal's men were completely annihilated. Except for Vermilion Bird. Her plan was very good. She had originally planned to sneak into the Gu family and then use the opportunity to get close to Gu Jinglian and collect evidence. She had long known that Luo Xingjie had thoughts of betraying her. That was why she was so loyal to him. She wanted to use this opportunity to gain Gu Jinglian's trust by betraying her master for glory. Blood flowed like a river on the ground, and there were seriously injured people lying on the ground. Chapter 2797. Before he came back, he had already asked his subordinates to spread the news. However, he did not expect that there would be such a special welcome ceremony today. He actually wanted to silence her before she returned to the Gu family. Naively, he thought that he could tamper with the Gu family's history. Interesting. Who was Luo Xingjie's subordinate? He could not remember. However, he could not think of anyone else who would have the guts to do such a thing except for the cabinet elders. A tattered red windbreaker was scattered on the ground. In the chaotic battle, Zhu Ke had been shot in the arm and was slightly injured. Cold footsteps approached. Time seemed to stop at this moment. She looked up in surprise and saw Gu Jinglian standing in front of her, raising his eyebrows slightly. You previously sought refuge with Luo Xingjie. Zhu Ke lowered her head and said bluntly, Yes, I am a disciple of Luo Xinghal. However, why did you choose me a few minutes ago? Why did you choose to betray Luo Xinghal? Gu Jinglian asked again, seemingly puzzled. Zhu Ke looked up and suddenly curled her lips. Because you are stronger than him. Oh. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows, his expression unperturbed. He suddenly sneered. According to my methods, once any branch of the family has the intention to betray, I should eliminate them completely to prevent future troubles. However, the topic changed and Gu Jinglian looked at her. However, I think you are quite pleasing to the eye. Zhu Ke immediately offered her loyalty. Young master, let me follow you. I am willing to be your loyal subordinate. Gu Jinglian was silent for a moment before he suddenly turned around and said, Tomorrow you will be glad of your decision. Zhu Ke immediately stood up and looked at his back. What? However, she heard him say, Because I will destroy all those who have disloyal thoughts to me. I hope you are loyal enough to me. Otherwise, even if you saved me, I will destroy you. Leave no room for negotiation. Otherwise, I will destroy you with my own hands. Leave no room for negotiation. Chu Ho abruptly opened her eyes, and her pupils violently contracted. When she saw the snow-white ceiling, she abruptly sat up on the bed. Her movements were too violent, and she accidentally broke free of the foredrip. There was a retention needle in her wrist. The needle fell off from the retention needle. Blood gushed up and splattered on the white bedsheet. It was very eye-catching. Chu Ho's breathing quickened. She closed her eyes and quickly realized that she had just had a long nightmare. She was suddenly awakened by the dream and had a splitting headache. It was as if her head was about to explode. In the dream, the memories that had been sealed away for 5 years rushed into her mind like a cocoon breaking out. Scenes flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. Gu Jinglian, the Gu family, Luo Xinghal, Interpol, Lu Yanwei, Vermilion Bird. Chu Ho clutched his head, which seemed to have been torn apart by something. His eyes were bloodshot and ferocious. Vermilion Bird? Vermilion Bird. This name kept surging in her mind. Finally, it turned into a vivid image in her mind. The memories ran through her mind. Each scene was like a card being read, continuously transmitting data into her mind. Vermilion Bird. This name used to be her code name. She used to be a special agent. Later, she was hired by Interpol and officially became a member of the intelligence division of Interpol's anti-mafia team. Her code name was Vermilion Bird. Chapter 2798. Within 3 years, due to her outstanding achievements, she was promoted and officially appointed as the highest-ranking anti-crime inspector. Vermilion Bird was just a code name. However, in the FBI's records, there were 2 people with the code name Vermilion Bird. One was the senior officer of the Hurricane Group, Vermilion Bird. The other was her, Interpol's anti-crime inspector, Vermilion Bird. In order to distinguish the 2 Vermilion Birds, she was also known as White Bird, while the one from the Hurricane Group was known as Black Bird. Although the 2 of them had never met before, they were often compared. After all, they were both Vermilion Birds. Although one was an anti-crime inspector and the other was a top mercenary in the military, their abilities were on par. If they had the chance to meet, they would definitely be strong opponents. The sound of Chu Ho waking up woke up Meng Qingxue, who was lying next to him. She didn't know when she had fallen asleep. Perhaps she was tired from watching over Chu Ho, so she fell asleep without anyone noticing. She raised her head abruptly and saw that Chu Ho had woken up. She was so shocked that she stood up immediately. "Chu Ho, you're awake." Meng Qingxue was extremely shocked. She remembered the doctor saying that with Chu Ho's physical condition, no matter how good his physical fitness was, because the wound was on his head, it would inevitably damage his vitality. Therefore, he wouldn't be able to wake up for a while. The blood clot was drained and the hematoma was crushed. However, there was still a small part of the hematoma that needed time to dissipate. She asked how long it would take for him to wake up. The doctor said that it would take at least 1 night. However, it was only 7 o'clock in the evening and he was already awake. Meng Qingxue was scared out of her wits by her sturdy physique. "How do you feel?" she asked anxiously. Chu Ho held his heavy head and asked himself, "Why am I in the hospital? Have you forgotten what happened before?" When Chu Ho heard this, he couldn't help but recall what had happened before he fainted. The police station, Xiaobao Chu. It seemed that he had not slept well for several days and nights. Coupled with excessive anxiety, he had actually fainted. However, when he woke up, he felt that his body had undergone an earth-shaking change. For example, the side of his head was unbelievably painful. However, she was used to enduring pain. No matter how painful it was, she would not make a sound. When she was in the training base, her pain tolerance was extremely high. The doctor said that her reaction to pain was naturally indifferent. No matter how painful it was to her, it was only about 1/3 of a normal person's pain. Even so, the pain in his head was still unimaginable. The effects of the anesthetic had just worn off. Usually, at this time, patients who had also undergone this kind of surgery would not be able to fully wake up. Even if they woke up, they would go crazy because of the pain of the wound. They would even rely heavily on painkillers and tranquilizers. She couldn't help but reach out to touch it, but her fingertips touched a thick layer of gauze. What exactly happened to her? What had happened to her body while she was unconscious? "Don't move." Chapter 2799. Chu Ho was stunned. She slowly put her hand down and frowned. "Do you have a mirror?" Her voice was colder than she remembered. Meng Qingxue couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She didn't know why, but compared to the Chu Ho in her memory, this person in front of her seemed a little unfamiliar. She was cold and her gaze was deep. She was like the dark queen of the night. Chu Ho had never spoken to her in such a cold tone. She didn't know if it was because of the surgery, but Chu Ho's temperament had changed drastically. Meng Qingxue hurriedly brought her a mirror. Chu Ho picked up the mirror and looked at herself. She realized that the right side of her head was covered with a thick layer of gauze. Her complexion didn't look good, especially her lips, which seemed to be covered with a thick layer of rouge. Meng Qingxue didn't know how she was recovering, so she asked in a roundabout way, "The doctor said that after you recover from the surgery, you might not be able to regain your memory immediately. However, if you recover well, your memory will definitely be fully recovered." Chu Ho interrupted her abruptly and asked slowly, "How long will it take for me to fully recover?" Meng Qingxue looked confused. She didn't know how much she would recover when she said, "fully recover." "The doctor didn't say when I can be discharged? At least after the stitches are removed?" "The doctor said that the stitches can be removed in a week. As long as you remove them properly, You should recover faster than a normal person. Chu Ho heard this and nodded. However, to her surprise, right after Meng Qingxue said that the stitches could only be removed in a week, Chu Ho obediently lay back on the bed and closed his eyes. His sleeping posture was ramrod straight and he actually had the posture of a soldier. This was something that Meng Qingxue had never seen on Chu Ho before. Chu Ho's attitude towards her was so unfamiliar. Could it be that he had already forgotten who she was? Just as Meng Qingxue was letting her imagination run wild, Chu Ho suddenly opened his eyes and said in a low voice, "Qingxue." Yes. When Meng Qingxue heard her call her name, she immediately went up to her excitedly and asked softly, "I'm here, Chu Ho. What do you want to say?" Earlier, she was still wondering if Chu Ho would forget about her because he remembered the past after the surgery. The doctor said that during the recovery period after the operation, because the blood clot disappeared all of a sudden, the blood vessels and cranial nerves were no longer under pressure. Gradually, the lost memories would be regained. However, some of these patients were lucky enough to remember what happened before, but they forgot what happened later. That's great. Chu Ho still remembered her. "Chu Ho, is there anything you want to say to me or ask me?" As soon as Meng Qingxue finished speaking, Chu Ho said calmly, "I've remembered everything." Meng Qingxue's expression suddenly froze. So fast? The doctor said that you might not be able to recover your memory immediately after the operation. Your body is also. Qingxue, Chu Ho said calmly, "I remember who that man is." That man? For a moment, Meng Qingxue did not realize who she was referring to. Chu Ho said, "Xiao Bao's biological father." Meng Qingxue stared at her, dumbfounded. "You finally remember?" Chapter 2800. Although his tone was calm and indifferent, the humiliation and hatred in his words were unforgettable. Meng Qingxue trembled in fear. "Do you still remember that man's name?" Chu Ho's chest heaved heavily. Suddenly, his thin lips opened slightly and a name escaped his mouth. Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian? In the CEO's office of Xingyu Financial Group, Mu Yaja sized up Lu Jinyu, who was standing in front of him, in surprise. Lu Jinyu nodded and said, "Yes. I heard that some time ago he washed the dragon sect with blood. In one night, the dragon sect suffered heavy casualties. Long Si was furious. In order to take revenge, he led his men to the biggest casino under the Gu family. In the end, they were all wiped out. Long Si was left alive, but he was brought back to the Gu family. At this moment, I'm afraid he's being tortured by Gu Jinglian to the point where he's better off dead." Mu Yaja's lips twitched and he suddenly commented, "No matter how depressed he is, he can't provoke that devil." Lu Jinyu silently cursed in his heart. "Boss, you still have the cheek to say that. Compared to a devil like Gu Jinglian, a super masochist like you isn't much better." Both of them were equally ruthless. Offending either one would not end well. However, in comparison, sometimes Boss's methods were more humane. After all, he was already a father. At this moment, in Lu Jinyu's eyes, Mu Yaja was sitting at his desk, full of the glow of fatherly love. Was this the warm halo of fatherly love? Mu Yaja suddenly felt disgusted by the way Lu Jinyu was sizing him up. "Don't look at me like that. It makes me want to vomit." Mu Yaja's sharp tongue was still as sharp as ever. Lu Jinyu suddenly thought of something and said, "I heard that for some reason, Gu Jinglian has a 5-year-old child by his side." "Child?" Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows but did not look up at him. Instead, he continued to flip through the financial reports and said indifferently, "He has a lot of women around him. It's not strange for him to have a child. Gu Jinglian doesn't believe in marriage. He's also very indifferent towards children. However, the informant I planted in the casino reported that Gu Jinglian dotes on the child very much. It seems like he loves the child very much." Oh. Mu Yaja was indifferent to this. Whether or not Gu Jinglian had children did not seem to have anything to do with him. Lu Jinyu, on the other hand, was engrossed in his story. "Boss say blood ties are really mysterious. You see, a man like Gu Jinglian is ruthless and has a wide range of experience in various fields. He's such an outstanding man, but his son is the kind that would cry out loud when he sees blood." Mu Yaja's expression remained calm. He only felt that Lu Jinyu was a very gossipy and talkative man sometimes. Lu Jinyu said with a smile, "This little guy might be the future successor of the Gu family. If that's the case, then this child will be a match for the two young masters in the future." Mu Yaja remained silent. Lu Jinyu asked curiously, "Boss, have you thought about who will inherit the Xingyu Financial Group in the future?" Mu Yaja glanced at him sideways. "What do you think?" Chapter 2801. It was obvious that he did not want to offend either side. It was a high-sounding excuse. Mu Yaja looked at him with disdain. Speak frankly. You don't have to be so reserved. I don't believe anything you say. If you really want to express an opinion, I think Yu is more outstanding. Just like Boss, he has an innate business mind and is very talented. If Xingyu Financial Group is handed over to him, you can also live out your remaining years in peace. Mu Yaja was speechless. Live out my remaining years in peace. Was he old? Was he that old? Lu Jinyu saw that his expression was not right. When he thought of how he had blurted out, live out my remaining years in peace, he looked guilty. Boss, pay attention to the main point. The main point is that Yu is very capable. If he inherits Xingyu Financial Group in the future, it will definitely grow stronger. I think so too. Mu Yaja casually placed the financial report on the table, stood up slowly and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The headquarters of Xingyu Financial Group was located in a skyscraper on the bustling financial street. The CEO's office was located on the highest floor. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, one could see the entire city's bustling high-rise buildings at a glance. Lu Jinyu walked to his side and silently compared the two children in his heart. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder. Sometimes, genes are really a magical thing. Xiao Yichen is far more talented in military affairs than Boss. Yu, on the other hand, was even more talented in business. In this way, the two little guys have each inherited some of Boss's strengths. One is civil and the other is military. It's really amazing. I'm so envious. Mu Yaja said coldly, if you're envious, find a woman and give birth to a child for yourself. Boss, do you think I'm annoying? Have you taken the wrong medicine these 2 days? Mu Yaja raised one hand and pointed at the clock on his wrist with the other. He said coldly, you've been talking non-stop since an hour ago when you came in and handed me the financial report. I'm already being merciful by not kicking you out. Boss, this is too much. As a loner, I can only watch you and sister-in-law being lovey-dovey all day long. What's even more infuriating is that you have 2 smart sons. I can't even envy you, but I can't even complain a little. It's not like there are no women chasing after you. That's true, but... Lu Jinyu complained. For the past 2 months, I've been either attending meetings or working overtime. Boss, tell me, how can I find time to date when I've been so busy? You're so busy every day that you don't even have time for a date. You didn't even have time for a date? It was time for a one-night stand. This man rarely had a serious relationship. Perhaps it was because he lacked the patience to deal with women. To him, women were a species that he would only think of when he was lonely. However, he could already tell that Lu Jinyu had only one motive for complaining and nagging so much. Protesting against overtime. He snorted, continue? Chapter 2802. But boss, don't you think that I've been working too much overtime recently? I worked for 13 hours yesterday and I went back and read my emails for more than an hour. With such a high intensity of work, I feel like my body is about to be hollowed out by you. If this goes on, I'm going to be crushed. You're hollowed out by a woman, aren't you? Mu Yaja glared at him. Some time ago, Jiang Xin said that he saw Lu Jinyu coming out of a hotel with a hot woman in his arms. He looked energetic and didn't look like he was exhausted at all. Go on. So, boss, do you think you can reduce the amount of overtime I have? Otherwise, I'll be all alone and have to watch you and sister-in-law show off your grace every day and work overtime. It's really not a good life. Lu Jinyu complained in a tearful voice. Mu Yaja glanced at him and suddenly asked, then, have you saved enough money to get married? The corners of Lu Jinyu's lips twitched. No. Then President Mu gave an important instruction. If you don't, then work hard. 3 minutes later, Lu Jinyu walked out of the office dejectedly. Mu Yaja finally sent the devil away. However, he kept thinking about what Lu Jinyu said just now. Who should he hand over the future Xingyu Financial Group to? Lu Jinyu's words were true. Yu's talent in the business field was more outstanding than his. He was even more outstanding than his master. His extraordinary talent was dazzling. If he inherited the Xingyu Financial Group, it would be the best choice. However, he couldn't unilaterally decide Yu's future. In other words, Yu's future should be in his own hands. If he said that again, he would not force his will on the child. Even if he became a teacher, a soldier, an artist, or even a scientist in the future, he wouldn't force him to do anything. Because he loved him. He loved these 2 little guys. Although he was usually not good with words, his fatherly love was deep. He was never good at expressing his love for the 2 little guys. Instead, he silently protected them and accompanied them. At 4 o'clock, Mu Yaja walked out of his office. Outside his office were Lu Jinyu and Jiang Xin's offices. He left under their resentful gazes. Jiang Shen said enviously, "You're going to pick up sister-in-law from work so early." After Mu Yaja walked away, Lu Jinyu ran his fingers through his hair and lamented, "Ah, working overtime is so painful. What's more painful is that I don't have a wife. I'm going crazy." "Boss, your aggro is extraordinary." Jiang Shen's eyes were red as he bit down on the pen cap. Lu Jinyu gritted his teeth and said, "What was even more infuriating was that one day, I asked him why he could get off work so early while we had to work overtime." Oh. Jiang Shen was rather surprised. "When did you say that?" "During the staff meeting." "In front of all the employees?" Xinyu Financial Group's corporate culture. First of all, the system of equal status between the company's top management and its employees attracted countless elites. Lu Jinyu said, "In order to convince all the employees, I specially checked boss's clock-in record. Which one of them didn't leave the company at 4 in the afternoon?" "Because he had to pick up his wife," Jiang Shen said. Chapter 2803. Boss wasn't angry either. "You exposed him in front of so many people, but he didn't deduct your bonus." Lu Jinyu sneered and said, "I questioned him, why is he allowed to leave work 4 hours in advance?" "Guess what he said in the end?" "Tell me about it." Jiang Shen rested his chin on one hand. Lu Jinyu adjusted his collar and imitated Mu Yaja's unfathomable expression. He said coldly, "I start work at 10 p.m. and leave at 6 p.m. However, I'm used to planning my working hours. Generally speaking, I can finish my work before 3 p.m., have a cup of afternoon tea and then leave the office." "Comrade Jinyu, what about you? Starting work at 10 p.m. and taking a 1-hour lunch break? How could he finish such a heavy workload in 5 hours? Most importantly, he could always spare an hour for afternoon tea." Jiang Shen slammed the report on the table. "Boss is a pervert." Mu Yaja drove out of the office. The reason why he finished work at 4 p.m. and left the office early was to avoid the busy traffic. At 6 p.m., the rush hour after work, the roads would be congested. He would usually arrive at the set at 4:30 p.m., then pick up Yun Shishir and leave the set. Based on his driving speed, he would usually be home before 6 p.m. Yun Shishir's scenes were also required to be shot before 4 p.m. However, on this day Yun Shishir's scenes were filmed until very late. By the time he arrived, she was still filming. Mu Yaja entered the set and walked to the filming location. The filming location had changed to Wuling Mountain. Because extreme youth mainly revolved around car racing. Racing on the mountain roads was also an important part of the story. The scenes were all filmed together on the same set. Yun Shishir filmed the racing scenes for several days. Although she didn't complete some of the particularly dangerous scenes herself, she still completed most of the scenes herself. Gu Xing's evaluation of her was that her driving skills were difficult to explain in a few words. Yun Shishir suffered a big blow. After a day of racing on the mountain roads, she still had to experience Mu Yaja's speed and passion on the way home. Every time she returned home, she would sit at the dining table with a livid face. She was already dizzy, and when she saw the greasy food, she wanted to vomit. Mu Yaja's driving skills were amazing. It was a pity that this man didn't become a professional driver. When Mu Yaja arrived at the set, everyone there retreated in shock when they saw him. Ever since Yun Shishir and him went public with their relationship, everyone knew his identity. The former overlord of the Mu Financial Group and the current founder of Xinyu Financial Group, and Yun Shishir's fiancé. It was just that this man was definitely a gentle gentleman in front of her in front of the screen. However, in private, a crew member once mustered up the courage to go up and say hello. Mu Yaja suddenly scanned her with a cold light and almost froze her into ice. It was too scary. There was always a sense of keep people away from him. Chapter 2804. When Mu Shi saw him, she immediately went up to him enthusiastically. "Chairman Mu, you're early today." However, Shishir's scenes aren't done yet. She had a few NGs midway and the filming wasn't ideal. The director had no choice but to cut the scenes and reshoot. Yes. I don't know why. Maybe it's because she's not in good condition. Coupled with the steep mountain roads, even though she took precautions, it was still difficult for her to film the entire day. Maybe she got carsick. Shishir vomited a few times and wasted a lot of time. Vomited? Mu Yaja furrowed his brows. He remembered that she did not get carsick. Unless she was in a racer's car. However, if she was driving and recording, many of them would use special effects. They only needed to capture a few moving shots and render them. How could she get carsick at such a slow speed? Mu Yaja could not help but wonder if she vomited because she was not feeling well. "It's okay. I'll wait for her." Mu Yaja did not think too much about it. He sat down on a chair at the side. She stood helplessly at the side and could not help feeling a little uneasy. She knew very well that with her relationship with Shirshir, there was no need for her to be so fearful and respectful toward Muyaja. However, for some reason when facing this man, the servility in her bones involuntarily came out. She carefully walked to the side and sized up Muyaja. She asked tentatively, "Chairman Mu, are you hot? Are you thirsty? Do you want me to get you a glass of water?" "No need." He had come over after afternoon tea, so he was not thirsty now. Muyaja looked at her again and suddenly snorted. "You don't have to be so nervous." She said nervously, "I don't know why, but I feel nervous when I see Chairman Mu." Muyaja touched his face and muttered suspiciously, "Could it be that I look too fierce?" No. She hurriedly waved her hands and said uneasily, "Mr. Mu is very kind and approachable when he smiles. He's also very kind to me, but—" The corner of Muyaja's mouth twitched. He was speechless. Why did it sound like he was some kind of national leader from her mouth? Muyaja was speechless. "Just sit there quietly." "All right." Upon hearing this, She immediately sat down at the side. Sitting upright and still, she resembled an obedient student who had just started primary school. Made one feel cold. Half an hour later, Yun Shirshir's scenes finally ended. The director finally gave his approval. Although this scene was not satisfactory, if they continued to shoot like this, her condition would not improve. It was better to wait until she was in a better condition before reshooting. Anyway, she was about to finish filming her scenes, so she didn't have to rush. After filming, the director walked over to her and asked, "Shirshir, you've been acting a little strange recently. Are you feeling unwell?" Yun Shirshir frowned and shook her head helplessly. "Maybe it's because I've been too busy with the scripts for the past few days. It's too tiring." Chapter 2805. Among the younger generation of actors, there aren't many who are as serious and hardworking as you and Gu Xingze. I think that as long as you persevere, you will definitely be able to stand at the top. "Thank you for your guidance, director," Yun Shirshir said gratefully. In fact, she had not accepted many reality show scripts recently. As for the reality shows that she had agreed to participate in, it was not because of the remuneration offered by the production team, but because those reality shows were sponsored by the products she endorsed. Therefore, in order to promote, she signed a contract to join the reality show. Since the last public confrontation with Ji Yan and the unintentional exposure of her relationship with Muyaja, many production teams had extended an olive branch to her and invited her to do a show with Muyaja. Muyaja did not like to be exposed to the public and had an obvious resistance to the camera. However, for some reason, whenever the production team sent an invitation, he would usually read the script carefully. If the script did not cross his bottom line too much, he would ask for her opinion. If she did not have any objections, he would decide to accept the script. However, the price he quoted was also very high. 10 million per episode. This was definitely not raising the price. His time was very precious. In addition, his popularity had recently far surpassed the big stars in the entertainment industry. Even popular actresses and A-list actors did not have as much traffic as him. Traffic referred to the exposure rate of a public figure. The higher the exposure rate, the higher the popularity. In addition, as long as he appeared on the show, the production team would take the list to the investors for bidding. Generally, during the time slot where he appeared on the show, a 1-minute commercial could be sold for millions of yuan per second. In other words, the TV station could earn 60 million yuan per minute by airing 4 commercials in turns. This did not include the viewership ratings. Yun Shirshir found that as long as Muyaja appeared on the show, the viewership ratings would definitely be able to secure the top spot. However, whenever she recorded a show alone, the viewership ratings would always be somewhat unsatisfactory. Therefore, it was not unreasonable for him to ask for a reward of 10 million. Yun Shirshir's reward was much less than his, only 1 million per episode. She could not help but complain to Qin Zhou, but Qin Zhou said matter-of-factly, "Do you think the audience wants to see you? Actually, what the audience really wants to see is the handsome and rich real-life version of the domineering CEO. It just so happens that Chairman Mu satisfies all the audience's fantasies about this character. It's not surprising that he's more popular than you. After all, there are very few men like Chairman Mu in this world." "Shirshir, you're saying that you're unlucky to have found a man like Chairman Mu. You must have saved the galaxy in your previous life." Yun Shirshir's lips twitched. "Are you praising him and stepping on me?" "No, this is the truth. Why don't we just let him debut?" Yun Shirshir huffed. "A man like him can make a living with his looks in the entertainment industry." "Are you sure?" Chapter 2806. Yun Shirshir shuddered in fear. He won't cheat. Yun Shirshir clenched her fists and said, he's not a playboy. I'm not trying to scare you. Looks like you don't understand men. Qin Zhou continued to boast, no matter how strong a man is, there's a saying that men think with their lower body. It's not without basis. No matter how strong CEO Mu's mental fortitude is, he can't defend himself against all those sluts out there. Yun Shirshir swallowed hard. After Yun Shirshir finished filming, she bade farewell to the crew. When she was leaving the set, she saw Mu Yaja sitting quietly on a chair, waiting for her in the resting area. She took a look at the chair he was sitting on. It was so shabby. However, just by sitting there, he gave off an air of nobility that couldn't be profaned. This was the first time she had seen someone who could make a chair that cost a few dollars look like a Taisher chair. When Mu Yaja saw her, he stood up and walked up to her. You're done filming? Yeah, you're so early today. Early? Mu Yaja lifted his hand to look at his watch and pointed at the hands. Madam, it's late. You're the one who finished filming late today. Yun Shirshir took a look at the time. It's so late? Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. Why are you so late? I heard from your assistant that you haven't been feeling well these few days. Are you feeling unwell? I'm not feeling unwell, Yun Shirshir complained. It's mainly because there are a few scenes that need to be filmed on cliffs. I thought I wasn't afraid of heights, but I had to drive through a very steep mountain road. When I looked to the right, there was a bottomless abyss. When I saw the cliff, I couldn't help but let my imagination run wild. I thought that if I didn't control the car properly and it flew out, I would definitely fall to pieces. When I thought of this, I got quite a shock. I reckon that I was so frightened that my vitality was damaged. There was such a saying? Could a person's vitality be damaged when they were frightened? Mu Yaja said, your body is really disappointing. Can't I be timid? Yun Shirshir felt wronged. It's fine if you don't comfort me, but you're being sarcastic. It was dangerous to begin with. If we're not careful, the car might lose control and fly out. That's a cliff that's more than 1,000 meters high. I never realized that you were such a coward. Mu Yaja rubbed her hair lovingly and said, but you deserve it. I didn't force you to take on such a dangerous script. When he first accepted this script, a certain someone was very ambitious. This has nothing to do with courage. If it were you, you would be so scared that your legs would go soft too. Mu Yaja suddenly smiled. I forgot to tell you. When I was young, I ran a mountain race here. Yun Shirshir choked on her words and asked quizzically, a mountain race? Yes. Mountain race is mainly about drifting and drifting. When were you young? 17 years old. Yun Shirshir was shocked. You took part in underground racing when you were 17 years old? Mu Yaja pinched her face. It's a proper world-class race. All the top racers took part. So did you get a place? Mu Yaja shook his head. No. Why? Chapter 2807. I can't guarantee that I'll be the champion, but if the competition goes on as per normal, it won't be a problem for me to get into the top 3. As per normal? Yeah. Because there was an accident, because this mountain road is very steep. I remember that during the finals, an American racer lost control of his drifting and crashed off the cliff. The competition was stopped because of that. Yun Shirshir was dumbfounded by what she heard. Mu Yaja continued, because this mountain road has been evaluated, it's too steep, and there's also the danger of rolling rocks. If there's a rainstorm, it's easy to collapse. So, the Racing Association closed this route. After a pause, he suddenly thought of something and leaned closer to her with a sinister expression. He whispered in her ear, I heard that this mountain road has been haunted before. Some underground racers secretly went to the mountain road to have a drifting competition. In the end, when one of them drove to the spot of the accident, his brakes mysteriously stopped working. At the same spot, he and his car crashed off the cliff and crashed at the place where the American racer died. Yun Shirshir was shocked. Haunted? Yeah. Mu Yaja deliberately lowered his voice and said, why do you think I insist on picking you up after filming every day? It's because I'm worried about you. This is a place where Yin energy gathers. More than 10 years ago, before the winding mountain road was built, many expedition teams came here to climb the rocks and mountains. Countless of them fell to their deaths. I still remember that when the rescue team went down the mountain to rescue them, they found many skeletons. Yun Shirshir sucked in a breath of cold air. Suddenly, someone patted her shoulder gently from behind. Yun Shirshir was already immersed in these bizarre and absurd stories. When she was patted, she instantly shrieked in fright. Hua Jin, who was behind her, was so frightened that he retracted his hand. When she saw that it was Hua Jin, Yun Shirshir patted her chest and cried, Hua Jin, why did you scare me on purpose? I'm innocent. Hua Jin said innocently, I just wanted to talk to you and patted your shoulder. Who knew you would be so scared? Yun Shishir was still in a state of shock. She glanced at Mu Yaja and suddenly pulled Hua Jin to the side mysteriously. Hua Jin, did you know? The Wuling Mountain is haunted. Haunted? Hua Jin's face darkened. Why hadn't he heard of it? Yun Shishir felt her scalp go numb. When she thought of what Mu Yaja had said to her just now, she still had a lingering fear in her heart. Thus, she recounted the ghost story to him. Suddenly, she looked like she was about to cry. It's so scary, isn't it? If I had known that this place was haunted and cursed, I wouldn't have accepted this script. Hua Jin was speechless. This kind of ghost story, I've heard countless versions when I was young, okay? You're obviously just making things up. What haunted? It's more like a lie to a child. How could you believe it? Yun Shishir was speechless. Chapter 2808. Yun Shishir's heart shattered into glass shards. She gritted her teeth and turned around to glare at Mu Yaja, only to see the evil smile on his face. If it weren't for the fact that there were other people around, he would have laughed at her without any grace. Yun Shishir glared at him angrily. Why did you make up a ghost story to scare people? I thought that you wouldn't believe such a low-grade story. I didn't expect you to be so innocent. Mu Yaja sneered at her. Yun Shishir clenched her fists in anger. So angry. She was actually tricked. So it was a story made up by brother-in-law. Hua Jin finally understood and laughed. Oh my god. Shishir, you're too stupid. You actually believe such nonsense. Wow. Shut up. You're not allowed to laugh anymore. Yun Shishir looked like she had nothing left to live for. At the side, the staff sitting in the resting area were also amused by the interaction between the three of them. This couple was too loving. Some time ago, Yun Shishir's fans gave them a couple name. Estee Lauder. When Yun Shishir saw this couple name, she snickered. If this couple name became famous, would Estee Lauder look for her to endorse their products? She didn't expect that not long after, Estee Lauder really looked for her to endorse their products. Yun Shishir's expression at that time could be said to be in a mess. After bidding farewell to the crew, Yun Shishir and Hua Jin walked behind while chatting and laughing. Mu Yaja was responsible for driving the car over. Shishir, you're so happy now. Hua Jin said enviously, if only I could find a man who loves me so much. His words were so fast that they were shocking. Yun Shishir quivered. A man? No. Hua Jin hurriedly waved his hand and said in embarrassment, I was wrong. It's a woman. It's a woman. Yun Shishir continued to look at him with a very deep gaze. Hua Jin immediately raised his hand and swore, I swear my sexual orientation is absolutely normal. Hua Jin? Yun Shishir said seriously, actually, it's not shameful to like men. He wanted to cry but had no tears. I really don't like men. I'm the number one straight man in the universe. Yun Shishir smiled. Hua Yuji. Scram. Hua Jin stopped mid-sentence and looked at Mu Yaja's back. He suddenly smiled and said, brother-in-law looks like a dutiful coachman. Yun Shishir hurriedly covered his mouth. If he hears you, he'll ban you. Mu Yaja could vaguely hear the discussion behind him, but he saw Hua Jin's cautious look. He raised his eyebrows but did not ask much. He turned around and got into the car, driving out of the parking lot. Hua Jin followed her car back to the apartment as usual. Although he bought a second-hand car, he did not know why, probably because he was unlucky he bought an accident car. A few years ago there was a rainstorm in the capital and half of the city was flooded. Many cars were soaked in water and became water bubble cars. The mechanic who repaired his car said that it was probably because he bought a water bubble car. That was why the engine was soaked in water and needed to be replaced. Hua Jin was frowning for a few days because of this. Yun Shishir said that she wanted to lend him money to buy a new car. Hua Jin, on the other hand, said that he wanted to rely on himself and use his salary to buy a new car. Chapter 2809. Is this considered cozying up to someone powerful? Yes. Yun Shishir gave a fair evaluation. Hua Jin sighed. What goes around comes around. In the past, there were many young actresses lining up to cozy up to me. Now it's your turn to be down and out. After a pause, Yun Shishir continued, do you want fashion resources? Hua Jin shook his head. No way. A male celebrity needs to rely on fashion resources to maintain his exposure. Isn't that too sad? Speaking of which, I remember now. Yun Shishir snapped her fingers. Some time ago, a reality show invited me to be a permanent guest. However, I have some issues with my schedule. Plus, reality shows are very tiring and I can't handle it. I can recommend you. Reality show? Hua Jin considered for a moment and nodded. That's fine too. Do you have a sense of variety? Yes, I do. The company has specialized training. Hua Jin suddenly said, don't think that I have the burden of being an idol. When I film a variety show, my sense of variety is quite strong. What burden of being an idol do you have? Yun Shirshir looked at him in disdain. If your exposure doesn't increase, I feel that you're going to be outdated. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, her poisonous tongue was like 1,000 arrows piercing through his heart. Hua Jin clutched his chest, his heart aching. Am I really going to become an outdated idol? Aha! Hua Jin suddenly thought of something. He pulled her hand and said coquettishly, Shirshir, why don't we create a couple? What? Yun Shirshir was confused. A couple like the lucky couple. Yun Shirshir thought that she had heard wrongly. She was speechless. Are you kidding? How can I create a couple with you now? I've already made my relationship with your brother-in-law public. Hey, publicizing our relationship can hype up cheating. Hua Jin deliberately teased her. Before Yun Shirshir could reply to him, the car suddenly braked. Hua Jin was caught off guard and his body flew forward. He quickly held onto the seat to steady himself. Mu Yaja, who was sitting in the driver's seat, suddenly turned his head with a cold expression. He cast a sidelong glance at him, his eyes unfathomable. Hype a couple? The man's voice suddenly became extremely deep. Hua Jin looked at him, cold sweat trickling down his back. Mu Yaja suddenly pinched his face and retorted calmly, Look, why don't you and I become a couple? Hua Jin trembled in fear. This man didn't look like he was going to be a couple with him. He clearly looked like he wanted to eat him alive. Brother-in-law, I was joking. Hua Jin hurriedly explained. He was almost scared to tears by his gloomy expression. Ha ha ha. Yun Shirshir was tickled by the interaction between the two. Hua Jin, are you tired of living? You know that your brother-in-law can't take this kind of joke, yet you still said it so loudly in front of him. You're clearly asking for a beating. Hua Jin was so frightened that he clasped his hands together and begged Mu Yaja for mercy. Brother-in-law, I was wrong. With that said, he stared at him innocently with a pair of starry eyes, like a child who had made a mistake. Mu Yaja pushed him back into the back seat and suddenly smiled. If you want resources, I have them. Do you know about the production team of A Male Pursuing a Female Phoenix? Hua Jin nodded. I know. Chapter 28:10. Wasn't A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix the production team that had just started financing? It was said to be a gold medal team with a top-notch scriptwriter and director. In 3 days, report to the temporary production team at Huanyu Tower. Hua Jin was dumbfounded. Had he managed to latch onto someone powerful? He had originally thought that this brother-in-law of his would be difficult to talk to. However, with just one sentence he was able to get him to report to the production team. This was too scary. There was a feeling that even if he casually plucked a hair from him, it would be as thick as his waist. Hua Jin was a little excited, his eyes sparkling. He had never dared to think of latching onto Mu Yaja's thigh. Even more so, he had never thought that it would be so easy to latch onto Mu Yaja's thigh. It was said that A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix was a show that relied on connections. By connections, it meant that the actors were all brought into the production team with funding. A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix was a very famous palace drama. Once the news of the production started, the financing reached as high as 300 million. This showed that the reputation and influence of the original work of A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix was unquestionable. Nowadays, most television dramas were developed using copyrights and IP adaptations. Because novels had a huge market, this greatly reduced the risk of the investors. Therefore, there was no news of an audition during the casting process. There were even rumors that this drama series was tailor-made for a certain actress by a certain investor. Hua Jin had only heard about it through the grapevine. He did not know which of Huanyu's higher-ups had specially invested in setting up an opera troupe to support a certain actress. The male star had also been chosen long before the financing started. Is it the second male lead? You call me brother-in-law. Can I let you play a role other than the main lead? Mu Yaja asked faintly. Hua Jin was so touched that his eyes were brimming with tears. He suddenly hugged Mu Yaja's arm tightly and said coquettishly, Oh, brother-in-law, can you provide for me? I can warm your bed, I'm sensible and obedient, I can be your confidant. Yun Shirshir was so amused that she let out a pfft sound. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mu Yaja's face turned green. Resisting the urge to vomit, he forcibly freed his arm from Zhao Yu's grip and said expressionlessly, "Get lost. Don't touch me." Yun Shishir was once again amused by Mu Yaja's reaction. "Hua Jin, stop messing around with your brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law's thigh isn't something that just anyone can latch onto. I can support you but forget about keeping you as a mistress." "Ah." Yun Shishir held back her laughter and said seriously, "Besides, your brother-in-law doesn't need anyone to warm his bed. He has me, Yu and Xiao Yichen." Speaking of warming the bed, Xiao Yichen had made a big joke of himself last time. At that time he learned the 3-character classic in the textbook. One of them was, "When Xiang is 9 years old, she can warm the banquet." Because it had a very heartwarming allusion, the teacher especially emphasized this line. In ancient times there was a person named Huang Xiang. His family was poor, and his mother passed away when he was 9 years old. He became even more filial and cherished his father. In winter the weather was cold and there was no heating at home. Thus Huang Xiang was worried that his father would catch a cold, so he ran to his father's room and slept on his bed, using his own body temperature to warm himself up. In summer the house was especially hot and stuffy. There were many mosquitoes and flies, so Huang Xiang used a cattail leaf fan to fan the mosquitoes away. Chapter 28:11. When Xiao Yichen heard this story he was extremely touched. Hence, one day when Mu Yaja returned home, the weather was still very cold. When he walked into the bedroom and saw a small bump on the bed, he thought that Yu had crawled under his blanket to play a prank. Hence he walked over and lifted the bump. However, he saw Mu Yichen in his fluffy pajamas. He was curled up under the blanket, but he was shivering from the cold. Xiao Yichen muttered in his heart, "Why is this bed so cold?" He had been under the blanket for so long but it still felt cold. When Mu Yaja lifted the cup, Xiao Yichen was shocked. Mu Yaja was even more shocked by his strange posture. "What are you doing?" the man asked. When Xiao Yichen heard this, a shy expression immediately appeared on his face. He explained softly, "Daddy, the blanket is cold. I'm warming it up for you. You've been working all day and it's been so tiring. I'll warm the blanket for you so that you won't feel cold when you get in." After he finished speaking, he fell into a state of self-satisfaction. He only hoped that Mu Yaja would be touched. However, he suddenly heard Mu Yaja's voice, which was colder than the blanket, say, "Why didn't you freeze to death?" Then he reached out to switch on the central air conditioner and tugged at his tie. "Get out." At that time Xiao Yichen's expression was as aggrieved as it could be. When he complained to Yun Shishir about this matter, she tried to suppress her laughter on the surface and expressed her righteous indignation towards Mu Yaja. However, she had no choice but to suppress her laughter internally. Ah! There was actually such a stupid clown in the world. He didn't turn on the central air conditioner and stupidly wanted to imitate Xiang Jiuling's warm dinner. Yun Shishir almost suffocated to death. "Why didn't you freeze to death?" Ah! Mu Yaja's rhetorical question was also of the highest quality. Her heart ached for Xiao Yichen for 2 seconds. It only lasted for 2 seconds. After sending Hua Jin back to his apartment, Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir returned home. It was already past 6 o'clock. Yu and Xiao Yichen usually finished school at 3:30 p.m. After the 2 little guys returned home, Yu habitually went to the nearby shopping mall to buy some food. Usually, when Yun Shishir returned home, she would be greeted with a delicious dinner. Today was no exception. As soon as Yun Shishir enters the door, she smells an incomparably alluring fragrance. She sniffed and smiled. "It smells so good. It looks like braised chicken." Yu poked her head out of the kitchen. Seeing that she had returned, she smiled warmly. "Mommy, you're back." He completely ignored Mu Yaja. Then he went into the kitchen and there was another flurry of swords and knives. The corners of Mu Yaja's lips twitched violently. These 2 little guys were becoming more and more arrogant. In their eyes, besides their dearest mommy, there seemed to be no room for anyone else. He instantly felt that it was unfair. However, it was no wonder that these 2 little guys didn't want to stick to him. Imagine an innocent child who had studied a text and imitated the story in the text to warm his bed. In the end he asked, "Why didn't you freeze to death?" Oh my god. Xiao Yichen's heart shattered into a million pieces. He felt that Yun Shishir could play with this joke for a year. Chapter 28:12. Ah. Yun Shishir was stunned for half a second. Suddenly thinking of something, she asked suspiciously, "Could it be that your grandpa's condition has improved?" Yu shook his head. "Uncle didn't say anything when he called, so I didn't ask too much, but I think it's about Grandpa." "Could it be?" Yun Shishir was worried. "Could it be that his condition has worsened?" "No, it won't." Yu smiled conceitedly. Hurricane Group's medical standards are definitely the best in the world and can be counted on one hand. I've only heard of people who were half dead being brought back to life, but I've never heard of people who were perfectly fine being treated to death. No matter how bad it is, it can't be worse than being completely paralyzed. Since Uncle asked us to have a video call after dinner, it shouldn't be an urgent matter. Yu analyzed calmly. Only then did Yun Shishir's heart settle down. That's good then. Even so, Yun Shishir had lost her appetite. She sat at the table after a few mouthfuls of rice, looking a little distracted. Yu saw her restless look and guessed that she was worried about Yun Yecheng. Hence, he put down his bowl and chopsticks, walked to the study room, turned on the computer and switched to the video call channel. Hurricane Group had a specialized video call software that could be used for both radio signals and wireless networks. However, such a video call software could only be used by the company's internal staff. No matter how powerful an outsider was, he or she could not hack into it. This was to protect Hurricane Group's confidentiality. All the internal communications of Hurricane Group relied on this software. Sometimes, people would be at different ports in the world and hold emergency meetings through video calls. Naturally, security was the most important thing. He initiated a video call. About half a minute later, the signal was connected. The image flickered for a while and soon Gong Jie's pair of big eyes appeared. Yu? Uncle, why are there only your eyes in the video call? Gong Jie used his phone to receive video signals. He held the phone further away, and his entire face appeared on the screen. He looked at the camera and smiled. Then he gently fiddled with his slightly messy hair and winked at Yu. Little Yu, did you miss your uncle? No, Yu said bluntly. Gong Jie, didn't you say that you wanted to have a video call with me after dinner? When Mommy found out about this, she thought that Grandpa's injury had worsened and she was worried sick. What exactly happened? Gong Jie frowned and said, Idiot, why don't you tell her after dinner? You didn't tell me what it was. Yes, I just want to see her. Gong Jie said. Ever since Gong Jie returned to Hurricane Group, other than the occasional online chat, Gong Jie had not seen Yun Shishir for a long time. After all, there was a time difference of half a world between the two of them. It was night here, morning in Hurricane Group. It was difficult for them to be together due to the time difference. Gong Jie missed her so much that he fell ill. Yu's expression was cold for a while. Then he said indifferently, I'm hanging up. Wait. Gong Jie immediately stopped him. How dare you hang up your uncle's video call? You're so heartless. Chapter 28:13. Seeing that he could not hide it from him, Gong Jie said, It's nothing much. Actually, it's about your grandpa. A few days ago your grandpa just went through his third surgery. He successfully underwent skin grafting and passed the critical stage. But, seeing him change the topic, Yu could not help but feel worried. But what? But because his wound was infected, one of his arms had to be amputated. What? Yu was stunned. Gong Jie also looked a little regretful. The headquarters did their best. In order to save his legs, they spent a lot of money. However, the infection on his arm was too serious, so they could only amputate it. Otherwise, he might not be able to pass the infection stage. Yu's expression turned solemn. Can I see him now? Yes, but you can only see him through the glass window. Okay, then I'll call Mommy. After saying that, Yu ran to the dining room to call Yun Shishir. When Yun Shishir heard that Yu had a video call with Gong Jie, she immediately rushed into the study room nervously. Xiao Yichen and Mu Yaja also entered the study room. The family of four sat at the study table and saw Gong Jie walking to the door of the ward with his phone. Through the huge floor-to-ceiling glass window, he aimed the phone's camera at the bed. Through the glass window, Yun Shishir saw Yun Yecheng lying quietly on the bed with an oxygen mask on and his eyes tightly shut. Although he did not look good, he still looked better than when he was seriously injured. After all, at that time, Yun Yecheng's face was as pale as wax, as if he was nearing the end of his life. Now his complexion was much better. However, Yun Shishir quickly noticed Yun Yecheng's empty sleeve. She only saw that one side of his body was empty. It seemed to be missing an arm. His arm? Yun Shishir seemed to have thought of a possibility and asked suspiciously, Xiao Jie, where's his arm? Sister, Uncle's arm was severely infected and had to be amputated. I once considered using cell regeneration surgery, but the project is too big. Even if the surgery can be completed successfully, Uncle might not be able to survive until then. If the infection spreads, it won't just be a matter of amputating an arm. Gong Jie's voice rang out. Yun Shishir's eyes suddenly dimmed a few notches. Gong Jie turned the camera to face himself and smiled comfortingly. But don't worry. If there are no accidents and the rehabilitation goes smoothly, Uncle will still be able to walk. Can he still walk? Yes. Gong Jie continued. Do you remember what the doctor said when Uncle was discharged from the hospital? He inhaled a lot of concentrated sulfuric acid and burned his throat. But these are not big problems. Uncle is fine now. Don't worry. A look of relief finally appeared on her face. Thank you, Xiao Jie. Gong Jie raised an eyebrow. Sister, you sound too distant. As he said that, he suddenly smiled devilishly and stuck his handsome face close to the camera. If you really want to thank me, why don't you give me a kiss? Yu immediately smiled and leaned in front of the computer screen. She pouted and kissed the camera. Gong Jie saw this and frowned. Who wants you to kiss me? Chapter 28:14. Did this guy have to be so arrogant? Gong Jie harumphed coldly. I'm so disappointed. I've been working so hard and taking care of you in the ward day and night, and you guys still treat me like this. Yun Shishir smiled and said, Xiao Jie, don't be sad. When you come back, I'll give you a kiss as soon as you come back. Gong Jie's face finally warmed up a little when he heard this. Sister dotes on me. But I've been a little busy recently, so I won't be able to come back to see you for a while. What are you busy with? It's about work. Gong Jie didn't go into detail. He only said a few words and didn't exchange too many pleasantries before hanging up the video call. Just as he ended the video call, the phone slipped out of his hand. He fell onto the sofa and couldn't bear the pain any longer. His face turned pale. Alice walked to his side and sized him up coldly. You're lucky that you could endure it until now. It hurts a lot, doesn't it? Gong Jie looked at her coldly and harumphed. But he said arrogantly, this pain is nothing. Before he could finish his sentence, Alice reached out and poked his shoulder. Gong Jie hissed in pain and sucked in a breath of cold air. He pushed her hand away. What are you doing? Didn't you say, this pain is nothing? Let me try and see if you really don't feel pain or if you're just enduring it. With that, Alice put aside the first aid kit in her hand and emphasized, Young master, it's time to change your dressing. Take off your clothes. Gong Jie reached out silently and tugged at his tie before slowly unbuttoning it. When he thought about the 3 casualties on his return today, he felt a turbid breath brewing in his chest that was difficult to swallow. This time he went to AFH to transport a batch of military ammunition to the frontline battlefield. When he was about to return home, he was surrounded by the enemy's Country M soldiers. A long-range sniper's fatal shot almost took his life. AFH was famous for being dangerous. The reason he accepted this order was to exchange it for chips in other markets. No matter how dangerous this order was, it had to be carried out. However, he did not expect that he would once again make a trip to the gates of hell. Alice didn't help him. She knew very well that no matter how close this man was to her, he would never allow her to take advantage of him. He didn't like anyone touching him. Therefore, even though she knew that he was injured and that it was very difficult for him to do certain actions, she still tactfully did not help him. Gong Jie slowly unbuttoned his shirt and took off his uniform. The black shirt inside had already been stained with blood and was extremely sticky. Fortunately, it was a black shirt that was soaked in blood. Even so, it was hard to tell. I don't know what's wrong with you. You came back injured, but the first thing you thought of was to treat your wound. Aren't you afraid that it will get infected? Gong Jie frowned but didn't say anything. Indeed. When he returned to the Hurricane Group, his first thought was to see Yun Shishir's face. He missed her. He wanted to see her like crazy. He was in so much pain that his mind was in a mess, but there was only one thought that was very clear. He wanted to hear her voice. Chapter 28:15. It was probably because he had just narrowly escaped death. Therefore he especially wanted to see the person that he missed dearly. When he came back, half of his snow-white uniform was stained with blood, but he still had the strength to change into a dark-colored outfit. Alice was puzzled. You really don't want to live anymore. If the wound gets infected, it'll be very troublesome. With you around, do you think I'll die? He replied unhurriedly. Alice raised her eyebrows. I didn't expect the insufferably arrogant second young Master Gong to have his precious life in the hands of others. Stop talking nonsense. Gong Jie took off his clothes to half his shoulders, closed his eyes, and exposed his wound to the cold air. He asked faintly, Can you find the bullet? Alice immediately put on her gloves, and then bent down slightly to take a look. The bullet didn't completely penetrate the muscle. The wound is between the collarbone and the shoulder. The bullet is embedded in the surface of the flesh about 2 centimeters. Alice felt that it was inconceivable. She could tell at a glance that this bullet should be a powerful bullet from a sniper rifle. She asked in a daze, How many layers of bulletproof vest did you wear? 1 layer. How is that possible? Alice obviously didn't believe it. With the power of this bullet, even if you wear 2 layers of bulletproof vests, it can still fiercely penetrate your body, instantly lacerating your flesh. It's obvious that the sniper aimed at the fatal position of your heart. It's a miracle that you survived. This bullet didn't enter the body, but was embedded in the epidermis. But according to her rich experience, this kind of bullet, no matter how many bulletproof vests he wore, would not only cause such a wound. Gong Jie looked up and replied coldly, "Before I was shot, a death guard stood in front of me to protect me. The bullet first passed through his body, and because I was wearing a bulletproof vest, it blocked a lot of the impact. In other words, the reason why this bullet deviated was because someone protected you and blocked the bullet for you. Fortunately, someone blocked the bullet for you. Otherwise, this bullet is enough to take your life." Based on her estimation, Alice judged that if there were no guards to block the bullet for him, the bullet would definitely cause a bowl-sized wound on his body. Take out the bullet first and then check to see if there are any other wounds. It won't be fun if the ribs are shattered. He still remembered that one of Gong Jie's subordinates was wearing a thick bulletproof vest. However, after being shot, although the bullet did not penetrate the bulletproof vest, the huge impact shattered his ribs, and the rib fragments pierced his heart, killing him on the spot. What a lunatic. Alice took off her gloves and said, "Let's get ready for the surgery." Surgery? What else? Do you want to keep this bullet as a souvenir? Alice asked. There's no need to go to the operating table for such a minor injury, right? The ammunition in the warhead has already spread into the wound. If we don't do in-depth treatment, who knows what will happen? Gong Jie closed his eyes, clenched his fists tightly and slowly got up. However, just as he got up, he only felt darkness in front of his eyes. After a moment of dizziness, he almost fell. Alice immediately reached out to support him. All his weight was on her, so it was inevitable that he was heavy. Chapter 28:16. Gong Jie closed his eyes, clenched his fists tightly and slowly got up. However, just as he got up, he felt his vision go dark. After a moment of dizziness, he almost fell down. Alice immediately reached out to support him. He was leaning all his weight on her, so it was inevitable that he was heavy. What do you usually eat? You're really heavy? Alice said with difficulty. Don't tell father about this. He said in a low voice and closed his eyes. Alice finally became a little nervous. Gong Jie was in a lot of pain. He actually fainted from the pain, which meant that the wound infection had worsened. In such a bad situation, he did not enter the operating room immediately. Instead, he took his phone and made that inexplicable call. However, what Alice did not know was that Gong Jie could not wait to call Yun Shishir's phone because he was always worried that if his injury worsened, he would not have the chance to hear it. As the CEO of the Hurricane Group, his identity meant that he was destined to walk on the edge of hell in the mortal world, not to mention going through hell and hell. No matter how many people there were to protect him, there was never anything that was foolproof. The reason he was shot this time was entirely because he did not expect a certain anti-government organization to be so arrogant and rampant. After he was injured, a group of people escorted him back to the headquarters. The Hurricane Group had its own air route territory. Even if they did not need to report to the signal tower, they could take off at any time and anywhere. When they returned to the headquarters, Gong Jie had lost a lot of blood, but he did not enter the operating room immediately. It was only when he received a video call from Yun Shishir that the huge rock hanging in his heart was finally lifted. Alice was beside herself with anger. Was he joking with his own body? Did he know that if the wound infection worsened, it would be very serious, and he might not even be able to keep his life? She immediately called for people and hurried him into the operating room. In the wee hours of the morning. After 3 hours of intense surgery, Alice finally removed the bullet, cleaned the wound and checked Gong Jie's other injuries. Fortunately, other than the gunshot wound on his body, there were no other signs of injury. This brat was really lucky. Gong Jie opened his eyes and watched her slowly place a bullet on the tray. Bang! The sound was crisp and clear. Because of the huge impact, the bullet had already been deformed. After the wound was cleaned, she stopped the bleeding, cleaned it up and stitched it up in one go. Alice let out a sigh of relief. Will this place leave a scar? Gong Jie suddenly asked. Alice glanced at him and snorted, What do you think? Such a deep wound will definitely leave a scar. Wouldn't that be ugly? Gong Jie furrowed his eyebrows, obviously disgusted. So far, the thing he was most satisfied with about himself was his well-proportioned body. Especially at the shoulder blade and collarbone, the joints were clear and the texture was distinct. This was inseparable from the fact that he usually paid attention to training. This bullet hole was really ugly. I didn't expect you to be so delicate. However, you'll leave a scar. Isn't it normal for men to have scars? I feel that men with scars on their bodies are very sexy. Shallow. Gong Jie disagreed. I don't think men must have scars on their bodies. It's ugly. Chapter 28:17. Gong Jie's eyes darkened when he heard that. He seemed to be seriously considering this suggestion. Alice glanced at him and suddenly smiled. But even if you want to get a tattoo, you have to wait for a while. At least wait for the wound to heal. Gong Jie ignored her. He frowned and used a little strength to sit up on the operating table. The green sterile cloth that was used to cover his body suddenly slid down his chest, revealing his muscular chest muscles that were full of strength. The anesthesia was partial. He could not feel the left side of his body. Therefore, he could only rely on the right side of his body to provide power. How long will it take for the drug to wear off? He looked back and asked. Alice replied, about an hour later. Damn it. Gong Jie was a little anxious. He gently rubbed his messy forehead and slowly stood up. Alice could not help but look at his naked upper body. However, because of the scene she saw, she swallowed a little in a daze. His body was really amazing. She did not know how he usually trained. The muscles on his body did not belong to the typical style of Mr. Muscle. Every muscle texture was just right. If there was more, he would appear rough and arrogant. If there was less, he would appear thin and restrained. Especially his lower abdomen. His 8-pack abs were well defined. Mermaid's belt and a male dog's waist. It was said that Gong Jie could do 10 one-handed handstands without a problem. What did it mean to do 10 one-handed handstands in one go? There were only 7 one-handed handstands recorded in the world record. Gong Jie could do 10. This kind of waist and abdomen was too scary. Just looking at this kind of body, it would give rise to a lot of 18 forbidden thoughts. It was too erotic. Alice could not help but stare. What are you looking at? I'm studying your male dog's waist. I heard that with a body like yours, your sexual ability should be very strong. Gong Jie's eyes were cold. He said mockingly, you don't even have a man. How can you understand sexual ability? Alice's face darkened. Was this guy mocking her? Gong Jie's face was expressionless as he tapped his head lightly with his long finger. Also, anyone with half a brain would know that one's figure has nothing to do with ability X. What right do you have to talk about me? Aren't you single as well? As Alice spoke, she snorted coldly. The Gong family is spreading rumors that second young Master Gong's sexual orientation is abnormal. You hang out with mercenaries all day long and there are only men around you. Everyone is suspecting if there's something wrong with your sexual orientation. Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and retorted, oh? If that's the case, staying in the medical center all day, you're either soaked in the smell of formalin or accompanied by corpses. Miss Alice, could it be that you have a corpse fetish? Alice's face turned even paler. What did you say? You can understand the literal meaning. You don't need me to explain, right? After Gong Jie said that, he snorted coldly. He dared to amuse her. He needed to be taught a lesson. In the entire hurricane group, he was definitely second to none when it came to venomous tongues. To amuse him? You're asking for it. Gong Jie was a little disgusted by the smell of disinfectant in the operating room. He frowned and looked down at his wound. It had been completely cleaned, neatly stitched up and bandaged with gauze. He got up, pulled out the retention needle in his hand and walked towards the door. You still need to continue the anti-inflammatory. Bang. Chapter 28:18. What answered him was the cold sound of the door closing. Alice knew in her heart that Gong Jie was probably in a bad mood at the moment. He even became impatient with the usual jokes. After all, a comrade in the team had died, so he should be very anxious. In the morgue, Gong Jie put on a coat and slowly walked in. A group of people was cleaning up the body. Hearing the sound of the door opening, everyone looked over. When they saw him, they immediately bowed respectfully. Young Master Gong. How is he? He's still cleaning the congealed blood stains on his body. Gong Jie pushed through the crowd and walked over. He saw a man lying straight on the morgue bed. Because of the time of death, his body was completely stiff. All the clothes on his body were carefully removed. Because of the congealed blood, the clothes and skin were stuck together. It took a lot of effort to separate the clothes from the flesh. Gong Jie looked down and his expression gradually turned cold. It happened suddenly. In such a chaotic scene, artillery fire flew everywhere, smoke filled the air and gunshots were endless. His cargo plane was parked far away. After the transaction, he had to pass through a war-torn area to return to the temporary tarmac. Gong Jie was escorted all the way. In just a few seconds he thought about some things and slightly relaxed his vigilance. Then an accident happened. An armed person lying in ambush on a signal tower in the distance raised his sniper rifle and aimed at his head. He had an anti-signal device on his body. The alarm sounded. The death guard beside him reacted immediately. Before he could figure out where the enemy was, he pounced on him without thinking and used his body to protect him. In just half a second, Gong Jia heard a gunshot. Then, almost in an instant, warm blood almost splattered all over his face. He widened his eyes in shock. After a short pause, he quickly realized that something had happened. He was attacked. There were a total of 2 bullets. One bullet blew up the death guard's head and pierced into the bushes in the distance. The other bullet penetrated his chest. In the end, because of the bulletproof vest, it pierced into his flesh. In a short period of time, the death guard who had pounced on him stopped breathing. His body went limp on the ground, and his head was badly mutilated. It was a ghastly sight. And now, this sacrificed death guard was being transported back to the headquarters. Gong Jia walked to the morgue and looked down at the quiet person on the bed. Counting carefully, this was probably the 3rd guard who had lost his life because of him. Gong Jia asked coldly, "What is his family background?" "Young Master Gong, his code name is X1. He has a younger sister and a mother at home. Make arrangements for his funeral." About the amount of compensation, Gong Jia said, 10 million. Send it to his family on a check. The crowd sucked in a breath of cold air. Oh my God. 10 million. This was definitely a considerable sum. It should be known that in any mercenary organization, once a person was sacrificed, the compensation they would receive would definitely be a small portion. For example, in the Red Thorn Special Agent Organization, if someone died for some reason, the organization would at most give out 2 million as compensation. 10 million was an astronomical figure for a mercenary. The financial resources of the Hurricane Group were really terrifying. Facing everyone's doubts, Gong Jia said, "He protected my life. My life is far more than this amount." Chapter 28:19. He had been trained in a mercenary organization since he was young, and he had developed a courageous spirit. Therefore, to him, 10 million yuan was definitely worth that much just based on this person's sincerity. "Young Master Gong, how should we deal with this matter? Have you found any information about that sniper?" "No." His subordinate replied, "There are constant wars in Afghanistan. Many of the anti-government forces are not organized, and there are even many members of terrorist organizations mixed in. However, from their uniforms, you can tell which anti-government military organization they are from. AF was in constant war, and the anti-government forces were divided into different organizations. Therefore, they needed to be differentiated. Find that organization." Gong Jia ordered, "Bring the leader of that organization back." Yes. The hospital was filled with a pungent smell of disinfectant. The hospital bed shook. Chu Ho supported her upper body and lay there for a day and a night. She felt that her head was unbelievably heavy. If this continued, she did not know how long it would take for her to recover. Chu Ho originally wanted to listen to Meng Qingxue, so she just lay there quietly and did nothing. But when she thought of Xiao Baochu, she felt uneasy again. She missed him. Even though she had regained her memories of Xiao Baochu were still very deep. She missed him. In this world, this child was her only family member and the person she cared about the most. She had to recover quickly, find him, and wait for him to leave this place. Thinking of this, He gritted her teeth and struggled to stand up with the help of the bed. When Meng Qingxue came back with the food, she saw Chu Ho from afar holding onto the wall and walking with difficulty. It was extremely difficult for her to walk. Unlike her usual fast steps, she held onto the wall with one hand and used the other to maintain her balance. She walked with difficulty. Meng Qingxue quickly put the lunch box aside and rushed over nervously. "Chu Ho, why did you get out of bed?" she complained. "Didn't I tell you that I was going to get some food and would be back soon? Why did you get out of bed? Are you looking for something?" "I'm taking a walk to recover my energy," He explained seriously. "Exercise? You used your head for this surgery so you don't need to rehabilitate your limbs," Meng Qingxue explained, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Chu Ho looked up at her deeply and said with a smile, "If you lie down like this, your limbs will be stiff. Walking around will allow me to recover faster." When she was still working in Interpol, she was often injured. Therefore, she knew what to do to recover faster. Meng Qingxue could not win an argument with her. She also knew that the latter was stubborn, so she did not stubbornly argue with her. Instead, she smiled at her and said, "I've prepared some millet porridge and side dishes for you. You can only eat liquid food now, but it won't fill you up. I've asked the doctor. Millet porridge is edible. Okay, thank you. Meng Qingxue helped her into the ward and brought in a bowl of millet porridge. The doctor had repeatedly reminded her to have a bland diet, so she had only prepared a bland meal. Although it was a little monotonous, given Chu He's condition, she could only eat bland food. When you're better, we'll have a good meal. Chu Ho held her chopsticks and said calmly, I'm not particular about food as long as it's edible. She looked up and asked, Have you eaten? Chapter 28:20. Meng Qingxue nodded hurriedly. Yes, I ate at the canteen. What did you eat? I ate buns and dried tofu. Are you full? You don't want to eat more? Meng Qingxue quickly waved her hand. No, I'm full. Chu Ho nodded. Meng Qingxue sat opposite her and quietly watched her eat her porridge. She didn't know why, but ever since Chu Ho woke up after her operation, her entire aura had changed. In the past, although Chu Ho looked cold on the surface, she still had an extremely gentle aura. It was probably because she was a mother that she was very easygoing. However, the current Chu Ho only made her think of one word. Machine. Her eyes were cold and her expression was indifferent. Even when she was eating, she was like a robot. Her eyes were rigid and her face was serious, as if she didn't have any emotions. However, such a posture was very elegant and pleasing to the eye. She was like a noble gentleman of the royal family. Her facial features were very beautiful, but because of her short hair, she had a cold aura that some women didn't have. For a moment, she couldn't think of any man who could conquer such an aura. Meng Qingxue couldn't help but imagine what kind of person Xiao Bao's father was. A man who could conquer Chu Ho must be very powerful. She was very curious. However, after Chu Ho woke up, he didn't mention anything about the past. This made her more or less disappointed. Although she knew that there were some things that she shouldn't ask about, she was still very curious. After struggling for a long time in her heart, Meng Qingxue finally mustered the courage to ask, Chu Ho, do you remember those things in the past? I'm full. Chu Ho acted as if he didn't hear her question. He put down the bowl and picked up the napkin to gently wipe the corner of his mouth. Meng Qingxue's words were interrupted. She glanced at the bowl. She didn't drink much, only half a bowl. She couldn't help but feel puzzled. Are you full? Yes, I'm full. Chu Ho's tone was very calm. Meng Qingxue, on the other hand, was very sensitive. She pursed her lips and asked suspiciously, Did I ask something I shouldn't have and you're upset? Chu Ho looked up and met her eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, You just asked me if I remembered the past. I heard it clearly, but I don't want to answer. His tone was sharp and clear without any sloppiness. You don't want to tell me? Meng Qingxue was disappointed. What? Why don't you want to talk about it? Chu Ho said, Not a good memory. How could that be? Don't tell me that after so many years, there isn't a single memory that makes you happy? Yes. Chu Ho paused and said, There are some memories that make me feel warm, like you and Xiao Bao. I cherish them very much. Meng Qingxue smiled. Suddenly, she saw that Chu Ho's expression gradually turned cold. There are some memories that are like humiliation in my heart. Even if I remember them, I don't want to look back. Meng Qingxue was stunned. Is it about that man? Yes. Xiao Bao's biological father, right? When Chu Ho heard this, he smiled expressionlessly. Yes. You don't have any feelings for him? Meng Qingxue thought hard. Or did he betray you? I betrayed him. Whether it's me or him, I don't have any feelings for him. Chapter 28:21. Then, how did you guys get together with Xiao Bao? Meng Qingxue asked cautiously. Chu Ho's gaze suddenly turned sharp. Seeing the change in her gaze, Meng Qingxue immediately said, It's okay if you don't want to talk about it. It's my fault for being nosy. I shouldn't have asked so much. It's okay. Chu Ho lowered her eyes with a cold gaze. For the past few days, Chu Ho had been recuperating in the hospital in peace. However, ever since Mu Yanqing and Meng Qingxue parted on bad terms, he had not come to the hospital or look for her. In order to take care of Chu Ho, Meng Qingxue settled herself in the hospital. After all, she was not in good health and had to take a pregnancy-stabilizing injection every day. It was slightly more convenient to settle herself in the hospital. Within a few days, Chu Ho noticed her abnormality. Where's Mu Yanqing? She asked Meng Qingxue. Why hasn't he come to look for you these past few days? Meng Qingxue was washing clothes. When she heard her question, her expression became even more desolate, but she did not say anything in the end. Chu Ho walked to her side and asked indifferently, Did you have a fight? No. Then what happened? I made him angry. Meng Qingxue said somewhat vexedly. He probably misunderstood me. Anyway, it's complicated. I seem to have triggered his most sensitive part. Chuho did not know how to respond for a moment. Suddenly, she asked the most important question. What do you plan to do with him? I heard that he has a fiancée. How did you know? Meng Qingxue asked in surprise. Chuho narrowed her eyes and suddenly asked meaningfully, Do you know what I used to do? Meng Qingxue looked confused and shook her head. Chuho slowly leaned closer to her and said word by word, I was an intelligence agent and later worked at the Interpol headquarters. Meng Qingxue thought she was joking and couldn't help but tease, You're that good? Chuho continued, However, I can tell that he cares more about you and doesn't have any feelings for his fiancée. Although this man's character was a little bad, his nature was not bad. At the very least, he treats you with sincerity. Meng Qingshue's expression suddenly froze. She suddenly threw her clothes into the laundry sink and muttered gloomily, So what? Chuho sized her up and suddenly smiled. Do you know what you look like now? What? A self-pitying abandoned woman. Meng Qingshue's expression was extremely ugly. Didn't I tell you to fight for what you want? Do whatever it takes to get it? Meng Qingxue looked at her abruptly. You mean, you want me to compete with that woman? What's the problem? Chuho cast a sidelong glance at her. You don't dare? It's not that I don't dare, but I don't have the confidence. Without confidence, it's the same as having no guts. Chuho smiled. As long as you want something, you should work hard to fight for it, right? As long as you think it's worth it, you should fight for it at all costs. After that, she got up, returned to the hospital bed and lay down. Meng Qingxue continued to wash her clothes, but no one knew what she was thinking about. It was only when Chuho fell asleep that she finished washing the clothes and hung them up to dry. Chapter 28-22. Meng Qingxue continued to wash the clothes, but no one knew what she was thinking about. It was not until Chuho fell asleep that she finished washing all the clothes and slowly hung them up to dry. She returned to the ward and took out her phone. After hesitating for a long time, she finally tapped on Mu Yanqing's number. The call went through and after a few rings it was hung up. Hearing the beeping sound from the other end of the line, Meng Qingxue curled her lips coldly and dialed the number again. This time, however, the man was determined not to pick up her call. He did not even give her a chance to ring before he hung up the call. Meng Qingxue persevered and kept dialing. Mu Yanqing then patiently hung up the call. Meng Qingxue, on the other hand, was unbelievably persistent. On the 99th call, Mu Yanqing could not take it anymore. He picked up the call and yelled angrily, Meng Qingxue, are you crazy? From his tone, it seemed that he had drunk a little and was in a tipsy state. His words were childish and angry like a child. The background was a little noisy. There was no need to think. He must have gone to the bar to drink again. For some reason, when she heard his voice, Meng Qingshue's originally calm face finally rippled. Her eyes suddenly turned red, and her dry lips paused for a moment before she finally said his name. Yanqing, I miss you so much. As soon as she said this, tears suddenly gushed out. Meng Qingxue could not help but wipe the corners of her eyes with her hand. She hated herself for being so disappointing and felt that this fragile look was too laughable. Why was she so disappointing? She had clearly thought of venting all the grievances and frustrations she had felt over the past few days as soon as he picked up the phone. However, when the words reached her throat, once she heard his voice, she could not help but soften. Perhaps, it was because her love was etched in her bones that she was defeated in the whirlpool of love and had to compromise repeatedly. Perhaps, those who had never loved would never understand how hopeless it was to be afraid of losing someone. Because he loved her too much, he was always in a humble position at the watershed of many relationships, lowering himself into the dust. Mu Yanqing was born arrogant, so he had his pride. But she loved him so much that she didn't even care about her self-esteem. I miss you very much. Where are you? I'll go and find you. Mu Yanqing was stunned when he heard that. His voice suddenly became erratic. Don't come looking for me. We're already over. And? Meng Qingxue widened her eyes in shock. Just as she was about to say something, Mu Yanqing sneered and said, Qingxue, I'm the one who's incapable of giving my woman a carefree and happy life like my insufferably arrogant second brother. I feel that I have a clear conscience towards you, but, when I think about what you said that day, it still feels like a fishbone stuck in my throat. I don't understand, why, in your eyes I'm like this. Mu Yanqing's throat became hoarse as he gritted his teeth and hung up the call. It's not like that. Meng Qingxue stood up abruptly and grabbed her bag tightly. As she rushed out of the door, she quickly dialed his number, but he still chose to hang up on her every call. "He's not picking up my calls,"